sitting and casting back-to-back 40-plus minute games of EU SCC Smite. Thumbs up for me on Maxonomic here on this fine Thursday. Aggro is with me for what will be our first and only NA set over here in the I nearly said EU SCC. I'm doing great here today in the NA SCC on this Thursday. Average Joes versus Tiburones de Tijuana. And Aggro, this was a matchup we actually started to highlight as one that would be very important over here in the North American scene. Of course, Winter Dogs, Herculean Hoos, that'll be important, as well as Fishies versus Sturdy Artisans, getting down these final stretch of games, wanting to be in that top two as far as the standings go. Don't worry if you're an EU SCC fan, Pandemonium versus Just F6, that'll be happening on Saturday prior to the SPL, so make sure to tune into that one. But we will get to look at what these standings implications are in this Average Joes versus Tiburones set, because we saw Tiburones drop their first and only set to the Sturdy Artisans very recently, and then there's a bit of a drop-off, a two-game drop-off. So Aggro, Average Joes have some ground to make up, and they can do that on the team that they need to make up ground against here in this matchup.
These games are huge for the Joes and for the Hoofs and for the Winter Dogs and the Fishies. I mean, you have got to start taking games off these Tiburones and Sturdy Artisan squads if you want to have any hope of being able to catch that top two by the time this phase ends in the SCC. So I agree. I think that this is going to be a key one. This Winter Dogs, or excuse me, this Average Joe's team is starting to look better, though. And they've had so many different role swaps and pickups and new players and all that kind of stuff. But the big deal is that El Leon is back in the jungle, and they played up against the Winter Dogs last week with this new setup, and they just looked a lot better. Promise on this Ganesh looked fantastic. Just looked very good in general in this game. You have the other side of El Leon being that presence in the jungle. I think Griff looked fantastic. A lot of good things trending right now for the Average Joes, but now they've got a real test ahead of them.
Right, you saw that your iteration of the roster worked. Now it's time to build on that and iron out any of the issues that may have arose there in week one. Baronary out of the mid lane has been a pretty consistent fourth tier for this team so far. Aggro, what have you made of the mid laner's performance so far in the North American SCC?
Baronary definitely looked more comfortable last week than he has in the weeks before. I think that Baronary, this is kind of the case in a lot of teams in the SCC. I feel like their mid 3v3 core has been inconsistent, and that's been the case for this team, as it has for many other teams in multiple different regions, EU as well. It's really been the side lanes that have been standouts for me on a lot of teams, and it's no different here for the Average Joes. If Baronary can start to be a consistent all-star player for this squad, they're going to go far, and I think that having Promise and El Leon beside him in that 3v3 is going to help in that regard.
Yeah, and being able to do that against their opponents today, the Tiburones de Tijuana, ever so important. This is a team that has only dropped one game, and it's to the undefeated Sturdy Artisans up on top of the standings here in the North American SCC. So it's a tall task to say the least, Aggro, because the Tiburones, the Sharks, have been near unstoppable all phase long.
And remember, they should have beaten the Sturdy Artisans as well. It was a very, very close three-game set where they were on the Titan multiple times. I'm sure they don't want me to rehash how that set played out because it didn't go well for them. But this team otherwise has looked nearly unbeatable for a lot of this phase. Cope and Heat have really dominated the right side of the map. I think Blugan has been one of the best supports in the region. He's looked very strong. And then Guy J and Spreen have worked well together in the back line. Guy J, of course, kind of headlining this squad as the most recognizable name for a lot of the newer fans to the SPL after his time last year with the United. But with plays like this, man, there's a reason that he's getting a lot of the credit. He has played really, really well throughout this season, and I anticipate that to continue here for the Tiburones.
Yeah, Guy J is going to be maybe the most important target for their opponents here today in order to lock down. Because, look, I mean, the flexibility of his picks as well, I think, show. Played the Heimdall for a quad there in one of those highlights, and then the Apollo, something that we've seen kind of in and out of the pick and ban phase over the last few weeks. Guy J is going to be ever so important in this big matchup. So, talking about picks and bans, if El Leon is the big swap here for this Average Joe's team, is there any merit to the Tiburones in maybe banning out something out of the jungle, or have you not really seen enough yet there to start target banning the Average Joe's jungler?
I think it's kind of the opposite, actually. I think that I've seen enough from El Leon over the years that he's been a jungler for the most part during his entire career. He's had some dabbles in mid lane and in support, but he's played jungle for so long at a competitive level that I don't think it's really worth your time trying to ban him out. I'd be looking just to stick with those meta bans. Uzzy's looked very good on Athena. I wouldn't let him get that. Making sure that Tiamat stays off the board unless you're in the first pick position you think you could take it away.
Yeah, at some point, it's just not worthwhile. We'll see, though, what is the priority in picks and bans for game number 1, our final set of the day, here on this fine Thursday of Smite Challenger Circuit action. I don't know if anyone's going to get Athena ever again at any point in time throughout the universe in perpetuity.
That's it, huh?
Something like that. Yeah, just like that. 61%. There's no way, right? It's only 61% ban on Athena. I can't believe that.
But there were games where before she was buffed, so
Oh, that's right.
You got those coming in there, and then no one was sure how good she was after the buff. So ever since then, it's probably been a lot higher than 61%. But for the whole phase in totality, I think that number makes sense. Yeah,
I was looking for she's up there. Like halfway up there on the list, so she's up there. But well, SPL, right? I mean, she's at 90-something% ban rate at the SPL. That's more indicative, I think, of her power, and continues to rise here now in the SCC as Umoja and Athena both get taken away. Ratatoskr, what world are we living here where Ratatoskr is starting to weave his way back into the meta? We got a solo game and a jungle game there in our second set of the day.
Yeah, you got a couple picks for that Rat, and it's just a pick that Cope Babies use very well, that the solo laners use very well, so it makes sense. It's a flex pick for the Tiburones. Camazotz is the thing that's left open that they love. That was a huge contested pick in their matchup up against Sturdy Artisans, so I'm a little bit surprised that the Joes are willing to leave that open but ban away the Ratatoskr, but they bring different things. Camazotz is all damage and dive. Ratatoskr is more CC and early pressure, so you kind of pick your poison in that regard. It looks like the Tiburones is not going to go to the Camazotz solo at the very least. They're going to lock in that Cullen in order to try and match up and anti-heal away that Guan Yu a little bit. Try and get Heed a little bit of pressure over here in that solo lane.
Well, and it's the quadra kill highlight for Gaijay there on the Heimdall. A pick that we've gotten used to seeing. If it's a 90% ban rate we're worried about with Athena, the pick rate for Heimdall might be pretty damn near close to that metric. On her has been the popular kind of matchup against that aggro. It tends to be, you see a Jingwei and a Heimdall in a lane, and you're assuming you're just going to kind of chill and farm, but adding in that on her, suddenly things feel like they get a little bit more interesting. The on her has that ability to try and take these 1v1s, so once the supports leave, still the potential for some action over in what is then the solo lane on the left side, I guess.
And a lot of times, Gaijay is not going to shy away from that type of action. This is what I was waiting for, though, man. You cannot pick on her Scylla against Cope and expect that he's not going to Willix pick you. And this is like his signature pick that he's always had in the jungle. He's been jungling for a long time. I am shocked that the Joes are willing to pick those two picks and ban Rat instead of the Willish. Like, that is wild to me. Look at the bans against the Tiburones. The Willish is up there for a reason, man. That almost disrespect by the Joes in my mind to not think, or that they just didn't think about it at all, which is worse than disrespect. So I don't know, man. I think Cope is liable to go absolutely bananas in this game.
Yeah, you're hoping the reaction from the average Joes to that pick is, okay, there's the Awilix, and not, oh yeah, Awilix, right? I mean, it's very important, the precursor to the Awilix there in the conversation. But we'll see how these drafts round out. Now it's ever so important to avoid extra knockups if possible if you're the average Joes, and taking Sobek and Geb off the table, definitely one day of doing that. Xing Chen, though, now added into the draft here for the Tiburones. A large threat is looming here in Game 1 aggro, and continues to get worse, it seems, as this draft continues on.
Yeah, love the Xing Chen pick. Bluegan's played it so far, if my memory serves, so I think that he's going to be comfortable on it. Elion going to a tried-and-true option for him as well. That Mercury gives him that late-game carry potential, but I think that's a character that's likely going to have some trouble locking down a Heimdall. I think that the Joes, I would like their draft a lot if it wasn't very specifically Cope's Awillish on the other side. That it's just this giant rain cloud looming over the head of this draft here from the Joes.
Yeah, it does feel that way. I liked what I saw on Leon on Mercury from Leon the last time.
Yeah.
We saw that pick come out. Look, good engage. But, that's going to go by the wayside now as the E-set gets picked in here. So it looks like out of the mid lane, we know Sino loves to play this E-set out of the jungle, but with the Wheelix already there, likely be E-set in mid. Is that a nice way to round out this draft in your eyes?
Love it. Spreen has looked fantastic on this pick during this season, and he has looked very, very strong on a lot of different picks, but in particular, that E-set, you've got early pressure now in your mid 3v3 between the Awilish and the E-set in between those up against Scylla Mercury. I'm favoring the Tiburones to take early game fights every single time. I think that they really have the early game on lock. Now, if this game gets to 30, 35 minutes and it's fairly even, the Joes have so much more sustain, more easily confirmed burst damage from that Scylla than you're going to see from that E-set. They have the tools to group up and team fight later on, but Tiburones de Tijuana, they've owned people in the early game. They've completely destroyed them at times, and this draft facilitates that very well. I'd be worried about the early game here if I were the Joes. That's
right. This is NA. We like to hit the gas and keep things rolling at a pretty quick pace here.
Whoa! Not on the southeast. No gas.
That's right. No gas at all.
Yeah, not here. Okay, we have to be very conservative. In fact, we should all go hoard as much gas as humanly possible. Even though it looks like it's all going to work out in like a couple of days, we had better put it in plastic bags, laundry bins. I've seen, whatever you can get your hands on. Make sure you're doing that because it's definitely not really stupid and bad to do.
Well, luckily, you guys had enough time to go wait in line at your local gas station during those last games. I was casting with Gore, so both of us are going to run out of gas, and we're not going to have a chance. Maybe put some gas in your gas tank, and then just do that, and nothing else.
Sure.
Well, we'll save that conversation for the back room aggro. Tiburones versus Average Joe starts right now.
Yeah, save that conversation. Also, make sure you're saving as much gas as possible. Just trying to keep the thread going. For the desk to the cast, it's the Joes versus Tiburones. It's Finch and Mipswag as we go into this critical game number 1. And you set there for Spreen, Cope on this Awilish, and can that deal with the jump heavy on her for Griff, for Baronelli, who too can be vulnerable as well? I think that Cope has a lot on his shoulders for this Tiburones draft. Is that your read as well? And beyond that, most junglers always have a lot on their shoulders. Maybe more specifically in this case, please.
I was just going to blanket yes you because all junglers, as you already highlighted, are the most important roles in the game. But I think that Cope is going to bring a lot of the fight in the early game. He's going to be the one who's trying to find picks. He's going to be the one trying to get proactive on the map. But more so, I think it's on Spreen's shoulders and the shoulders of the Sharks to set the pace in the early game. For me, when you lock in E-set, it is a binary question on whether or not you played well around it. Did you get the first 2 Gold Furies? Were they before the 20-minute mark? If yes, this E-set found value. If no, then you're not really using that circle protection to its fullest potential. So keep your eyes on the Tiburones. I think we should see them grouping up pretty soon. I'd even get these Greater Scorpions down around the 5-minute mark.
Right, I mean, that is one of E-set's greatest strengths, is her ability to confirm those objectives to the point where it feels like there's almost no contest on the other side. We've seen a couple of different starts, but this time the jungler started at speed and the solo laner started at blue. We see that start. We've seen junglers start at red and then kind of collect all their jungle all around. And we've seen a more standard start where jungle and solo are both at speed at the start. Is there one of those that you kind of prefer? I mean, it's got to be matchup dependent and what you expect your jungler to be able to do kind of in their jungle on their own. But what's your read on how you start off these games at this point?
All right, let me go ahead and start this off by saying, hey guys, in Twitch chat, if you're in a casual or ranked game, do the standard start. Otherwise, in competitive, it's about where you want to find the pressure. And right now, it's in mid. Baronelli makes it out by the skin of his teeth at the expense of the beads.
Yeah, Baronelli is indeed able to narrowly survive there. There's more aggression in left, Blugan retreating, but Griff the one that looks a bit worse for wear. Despite everything that ends up happening, he and Gaijay have to retreat. But yeah, I think for the most part, jungle mid at red, solo jungle at speed, please, if you're just in a regular old game of Smite and you're not competing in the SPL or in the SCC here where these top-tier players are competing as well.
Yeah, completely agreed. But now we got a little bit of a chance. If you do the red start around your jungler and your mid laner, then you start to transition it. It allows your duo lane to get into lane much more quickly, which should allow them to establish the pressure to control the mid camps, that neutral Harpy, as well as the Scorpions in lane. That's why we start to see it at the competitive level. It's that macro play, but does eventually trickle down and slow down that jungler's farm.
Oh, but Blugan in trouble. The knockup is there, and Griff finds first blood. Blugan didn't have a chance, and on her remains the king in just about anyone's hands. The aggression it gives you unfettered and sometimes untenable. And listen, this god's always been that aggressive, right? But it seems like right now it's all coming to a head, and he is among our elite in the hunter role.
Just that larger map, man. Used to be back in the day, someone jumps on you twice in a row, you're typing in the chat, where's my jungler? This dude's jumping on every single wave. But now in Season 8, with the map being so much larger, it means that it takes a much higher dedicated rotation from your jungler. If they don't get the kill, if they rotate over and don't get anything, they lose out on potentially an entire level of farm, which means Griff should be alone on an island over there to keep jumping in aggressive, really only worried about ganks from the support throughout the early game. We might see these junglers start to shift their attention over towards the long lane at the 6-7 minute mark, but up until then, it's really about farming up, making sure you get a couple items under your belt.
It's a little bit more time for these ADCs to get a bit of a 1v1 over there. Still a 2v2 in the early with Blugan and Promise both there, but it has opened things up. Meanwhile, we got to talk a bit about Leon's. Cope is grouped up in mid and forced back Baroneri, about how Leon is going to have to kind of keep his head down for a bit. Mercury does have decent control sooner than you expect. Special delivery and Sonic Boom, even if the big crit damage isn't there yet, can be helpful, but feels like you do kind of want to wait a little while before you can get that crit on. When do you really want to see Leon getting active?
Well, if he does decide to finish off that katana before he goes into crit, it will slow down his power spikes pretty substantially. We're going to likely see him go into the stone cutting sword and then immediately into something like a wind demon or a rage getting stacked up, and then Deathbringer on the tail end of that. The second you get rage built, you want to start getting involved. You need to get those passive stacks lined up to just further flesh out that crit build, but outside of that, Mercury is tried and true late-game hyper carry. It's not about him, all right? We're not thinking about Leon in the early game. It's whether or not Cope is able to set the pace and force Leon to get involved earlier than he would like. If Cope is out there constantly putting pressures in lanes, that means that Leon is going to have to come out of his jungle, peek his head out of there, and try and help his team. But so far, Cope has been relatively quiet.
Blink engage from Heat, and the Rage transformation is on deck. In comes a great blink from Blugan that cuts off Leon's escape path and gets Tiburones on the board. But can Uzi come in and find a return? Cope's on his way too to keep these numbers stacked in the Tiburones' favor, but Cope doesn't want anything to do with this ultimate. And so Blugan goes down, but now there's a chance with a punish on the backside, but a nuts wall from Promise locks down both and gets his boy out of there alive. What an exchange to the right side of the map. Nearly everyone playing that about as well as possible.
Well, Uzi maybe a little bit late on the rotation there to defend his own blue buff. His boy's getting dove in my man's own tier 2 tower. Still not quite there yet, but was able to eventually rotate in and find the return kill for his squad and maintain his own blue buff there. But you got to get Uzi involved a little bit earlier than that. There's no reason he should be out-rotating the Guan Yu to the order side tier 2 solo lane tower, right? Doesn't quite make a ton of sense there, but this is exactly what you want to see from the Sharks. Bring the fight to Leon. If they have a late-game hyper carry, make sure that you're delaying that late game. Leon should be feeling the pressure for the near future, already a level down.
He should be, and there's a good chance the Tiburones will be back for yet another blue buff invade, as we often see. Maybe it was only Promise and Blugan that played that about as well as possible in that last fight. Unlucky for Leon, whose dash goes right into that blinking in. Xing Chen might have made it out otherwise. And then an excellent response over the wall from Promise to keep Uzi alive, despite his late rotation as you already laid out. He went with the Warrior Tabai, though, Leon. Not saying this is necessarily a must, that you got to get that attack speed going on Mercury, who's got some at his disposal already. But surprise at all, it's the Warrior Tabai in this spot, prioritizing the early power.
Leon loves the one-shot capacity, right? The additional power, once you do get that crit lined up, that first rage pickup, should help him out a fair bit.
3 times.
Yeah, we don't want to hit you more than once, right? He's going for that Saitama build, my guy. He wants to be out there finishing off these kills instantly.
He'll have the opportunity to do so only if Tiburones, particularly Cope, let off the gas. I don't see any reason why that would be the call there for him. Lots of right side pressure, though, on the menu. They'll be heading to Greater Scorpion first, the Sharks in this case. And blue buff not too far from spawning. This will be our first indication of if that was a one-off, just took the blue buff because they had the rotation, or if this is a game plan. Looks like they are backing away from it for now, but that blue buff about to spawn, and maybe a chance for the Joes to get there for free, but it was an about face. The Tiburones are indeed coming over to the blue buff for this gank, and Promise is on the way. Uzi is back in mid, and right now Leon preoccupied with making sure that speed goes down, but blue not up just yet. And now Tiburones have given up the Ghost a little too quickly. So I don't know if they can afford to stick around for this blue buff invade or not, as Guy J and Griff battle on the left side. I don't know what Guy J thought he was getting out of this one that isn't Desert Spears, but that's exactly what it is, and Griff finds another solo kill. Meanwhile, the blue buff invade indeed came out in force. Whirlwind of Rage and Steel gets the beads out from Leon, but he now here and already dropping the ultimate. They've even got Spreen for backup. They want this blue buff invade on cooldown.
They do. Now, this time, Uzi there on time does keep his teammates alive, but does not maintain the blue buff. I'm sure he is much happier with how it went last time around, able to pick up a kill for himself and the blue. But, meanwhile, Guy J getting sold out on the opposite side of the map. Not something too crazy. I've said it before, but I really do think the On Her High matchup is one that we've seen a lot, and it's an 8-2 favored matchup in favor of the Lion. That guy just has such good 1v1 tools, can't really use the ultimate aggressively, can Guy J, because of the CC immunity from the Desert's Fury, as well as just the ability to chase out with that leap incredibly easily, or knock him out of the Bifrost with Impale. It's on hers all the way down inside of that one, so I expect we see Guy J play a little bit more passively.
But Leon gonna do the exact opposite. He is the target, and Sonic Boom sets it up. Uzi has the last auto, and Average Joes have suddenly brought a cascading effect in terms of the kills. A lot coming from Griff, getting it done all on his own over in duo, but some good responses to this solo side pressure have gotten the Average Joes right back in this one.
They have, and Leon getting involved early on in a rotation in, despite Cope still having a relatively quiet game. Goose eggs across the board for the Tiburones jungler, whereas Leon trying to get involved, uses the ultimate, picks up an assist, does die as well, but this whole time, almost counter to what you'd think this matchup would go like, it's been Cope Baby farming up the jungle, just pulling slightly ahead. Now about a 3/4 of a level lead over his opposition. This Wheelish is going for the power spikes early on and picks up a Jotun's Wrath. Could even move in towards that Heartseeker in the next slot, or even potentially a hi-rez for additional burst potential. But either way, a Wheelish is power spiked. She is ready to get involved in these engagements, whereas Leon still needs one full item.
And he does go for that stone cutting first with the Warrior Tabi right there alongside it. So I got to think something along the lines of a Rage next for this man to get that crit in order and really start to cause problems for this backline of the Tiburones. I'm thinking Spreen in particular is likely going to be using Circle of Protection for this team around these objectives. Might not have that defensive tool as Cope finally showing some presence on the left side of the map. Looks like not going to find much over there, though. Ends up falling back. As you predicted, it looks like we're going to have to pause here. These junglers have not really been able to spend any time over in the long lane so far here in this game, and that's given Griff free range.
Yeah, On Her has never felt better than he does right now. I mean, jump in all you want, man. It's a 1v1, essentially, after that 5-minute mark, once the supports rotate out. We're now 10 minutes into the game, and we still have not seen an objective pool from the Tiburones. They have not utilized that E-set ultimate as the ultimate secure in the match, but they have already cleared out both Greater Scorpion on the Fire Giant side and the Gold Fury side. So you better believe next time we see a pick, either team should be able to move in towards the neutral objectives.
Yeah, and they're both a Pyromancer and that gold. Looked like, from what I'm seeing, I think it was Spring that had a little bit of trouble connecting. Looks like everything is A-OK now, though, as we head right back into this action. Worth noting, Spring did bypass that initial relic, did go with that restored artifact right out of the gate, which we sometimes will see. So we have still an option to pull up a relic later on in the build as Leon, waiting for a moment where Guy J can perhaps become vulnerable. Not going to end up materializing, though. Gives up on that. Now both junglers spent a little time in left, but couldn't find anything.
But Average Joe, seeing if maybe the Tiburones are asleep at the wheel, go ahead and pull it out. Stone Cutting Sword should help with the burn.
Yeah, and Baron Ares here, so they've just got the better confirm. Whirlwind of Rage and Steel comes through. I'm a monster and Crush used, and the Joes get the Fury. Plus, they've got Blugan low for the trouble. Looks like beads to come out from Promise and Leon, though, to set all of that up. So nothing ventured, nothing gained, but a pretty big win for the Joes all the same to find that objective.
It really is. Now 1,300 gold in the lead are the Order side team. And it's so surprising again that it's El Leon starting up the gold free. And that is one of the most Leon-style plays ever, by the way. Just hovering around the duo lane. All right, if he steps up, I'll ult him. If he doesn't, if he's hiding inside his tower, let's go ahead and pick up an objective. He's been doing that for 4 or 5 years now on this Mercury, man. I've been on the receiving end of that one plenty of times. So annoying to deal with. But it does take away one of the best early game tools from the Tiburones. Now ESET's ultimate is going to be relegated to potentially a Pyromancer or a team fight. It's not going to go towards that gold free, which is the best phase of the game for ESET, the best spot for her to be using them. Now Tiburones going to have to rest on their laurels a little bit for the next couple of minutes until that gold free respawns.
Right, certainly still going to have value around that 20-minute mark and on for a bit there where it can help with those late-game fire giants. But, I mean, I think you're right about this early game, Myth, where maybe Tiburones just kind of let a window pass them, not just with Spreen and using his ultimate, but Cope, who's looking to get active right now, steps up and does stop Leon from stealing the speed, or just confirming his own speed, but has to give up right away on that aggression, moves back up to the topside jungle. Just surprised, man, that we really haven't seen more out of Cope. I wouldn't be surprised if his damage numbers are rather low, too. Hasn't been a ton of action, but Griff is going to be jumping in, and GuyJ in trouble. The beats come out, and he barely gets out through the Bifrost in time, but Griff is head hunting right now as the Tiburones take down the Pyromancer.
They do. Man, Griff could do essentially no wrong. Man jumps in with a Disperse just to knock GuyJ out of the Bifrost because he had already used the Impale, intelligent usage of On-Her's kit to make sure that teleport comes through a little bit later. GuyJ off the mark with his beads, does it in the air. That is a very telegraphed knock-up. Unfortunate for GuyJ. Barely makes it out with his life there. If his minions didn't get in the way and block one extra auto attack, he'd have been back in the base inside a body bag. But with no beads available to him, will expose him to further aggression from Griff, who doesn't have to dedicate anything, doesn't even use his own ultimate. We've already seen that Leon is willing to make the rotation over there as well. I'm sure it's all the more juicy now that GuyJ doesn't have that defensive relic available.
He's had to play a bit safe, but Cope rotating over to this left side of the map. Wonder if Griff is ready for that to potentially come to a head. Griff steps up into it, had a ward, certainly knew exactly where Cope was, and laughs at the idea that Cope would come over. It's been a quiet game for this Awilish in the early. And talk to me about how Awilish feels in this mid to late game. She's certainly not going to fade away or do nothing, but it just feels like you're missing one of the points in the game where she's likely the strongest on the map.
Yeah, level 6 through 8, I've joked around before saying that Feather Step is essentially just an execute. That's how much damage it does in the early game, and she's just so versatile inside of these fights, having immunity on the Feather Step as well as a standard leap through the first ability. But the Sharks, that is, have not drafted incredibly well around her. Not too many knockups to set up. We haven't seen Blugan go in with the Skyhook or GuyJ use the Gallarhorn to set up for a Gravity Surge. We haven't seen Gravity Surge at all.
Heed comes in with the 2 knockups, though, and the follow-up not there from Cope, at least on those. Uzi pulled back in, but still seems comfortable, and Cope says, hey, get a carry, and I'll pull him back here, but certainly not Uzi, who gets up onto the horse, stuns out Blugan. And in comes Griff with a nice impale into damage. Half HP for Blugan at this point, but Leon lining up a Sonic Boom. But they might get Blugan without it. I'm a Monster came over the wall despite how much setup is available. But there's the Sonic Boom. Cope goes down to Baronary. And Leon way in the backline cannot help with the fight anymore, but Griff doesn't need it. GuyJ deleted of an impale that did a third of his HP. It's now time for the mid-tier 1 to come down if Average Joes so decide to stick to it. But the Tiburones got ran over in that fight, despite them being the ones that started it.
Yeah, Tiburones, we're not ready for Griff to show up, and this is the Griff show, by the way. My man is doing the most for his team right now, finding solo kills inside the long lane, rotating in and swinging for about a 150 per auto attack on tanks, by the way. Even Blugan not safe inside of these engagements. This on her has been just left alone to stew up for about 15 minutes, rotates out, and reminds people that maybe you should start to send people over towards this duo lane. Maybe you do need Cope to head over there and try and bail out GuyJ, because if Griff's allowed to go unchecked, this is the result. The damage output is there, and it feels like the Sharks don't know how to deal with it.
No, they do seem a bit lost in terms of where they want to go. My best reading of it now is that the hope is that they can get Cope involved with some of this setup that they have with Blugan, with this ultimate from Heed while he's in that base form and it knocks them up. But we didn't see it happening there. It felt like in that engagement he couldn't get the backline that he wanted. He'd have had to try and settle for Uzi, which I doubt Cope really wanted. they do seem a bit off in terms of how to maximize this ultimate from Cope, his early presence in general. And the same for Spreen. Those both have been heavily underutilized at 0-1 and 0 collectively.
Yeah, but it's because the Sharks don't have the best beads burning tools. Every single time Blugan goes in with the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, gets it beadsed out. What are you doing to burn them before that? Maybe a Spirit Ball from ESET, or you pray that Cope's able to set up a Gravity Surge on his own. It's just inconsistent CC from the Sharks.
Let's see, Fury pulled, and Tiburones should have a good chance to confirm the objective, but it's been dropped. Leon drops the Sonic Boom, and Blugan stuck on the front lines alone, but Leon in trouble in the back as well. Silenced, and Cope finally gets on the board. 1-1-0 for him after finding Leon overextended in the back of the fight and some good backup from Spreen. But it looks like in this 4v4 support for jungle, Tiburones are the ones who still feel like fighting. Uzi pulled into the squad. And maybe this is the moment they were waiting for. A Spirit Ball hits too, but Griff, undeterred, keeps on fighting, but in comes Cope. Who knew waiting to the 16-minute mark for an overextension was the call?
Yeah, better late than never from the Chaos team's jungler. Cope getting involved in a big way there to shut down the secure or steal potential from the average Joes. Now the Sharks in a position to step up and pull the gold free themselves. Circle protection still available. That means there's just about no threat of a steal.
Should be unlikely, but Guy J just had his relics forced out. At least the Aegis had to be used as Uzi gets atop the horse and ends up running away. Cope tries to catch up, but cannot do so. Uzi safe, and now still the objective in the balance. So yes, the Tiburones finally get a fight in their win column, sure, but there's no chance the Joe's just going to come in and take the objective on the back of it as the only Fury now hit. But the Tiburones are nearby. They won't give it up for free, and Leon seems to want nothing to do with it, so it's Blukin who moves in first for the knockups. But the Joe's back off for now. Looks like this objective will be claimed by no one.
Just a hesitation to use the circle protection, and it makes it so much easier to take these fights on the objective. Not only is it burst damage to confirm, but it's also damage mitigation while it's out, and it's the hardest hitting ability in the game, this game, right now. It's probably going to swing for upwards of 900 at this point. Already has the Rod of Zahudi and the Divine Ruin. If it's fully charged, it would have completely changed the face of that fight. It just feels like the Sharks miss an opportunity to pull the objective for themselves. Instead, reset, allow the Joes to step up, and lacking in numbers, by the way, 4 versus 5, and then pull it back. Blugan blinks forward, finds the CC, and then another disengage from the Sharks. It's just hesitation to use this oh-so-important circle protection tool around these objectives. I want to see the Sharks group up and just force a fight with it, drop it, and force the Joes to respond.
Oni Fury is now in the sight lines of the Sharks, but that gets dropped. We saw in that last fight, Myth, that Leon's going to have a real tough time diving this backline if Spreen is still standing after the Sonic Boom. The silence, the stuns, the slows, it was too much for him, and that was a big reason why Cope was able to get that very first kill, was that Spreen had Leon locked down.
Yeah, he did. Leon's been struggling to find his damage output. Hasn't got a single stack on that rage yet either.
Yeah,
bottom of the damage charts, 2,400, but not too far behind. Spreen on an early game god like ESET is still only about 400 damage ahead at 2,800. It just need to get him involved a little bit more so in these fights.
Big damage, although on to Blugan, and Leon is there for the follow-up. Sonic Boom in, but it costs him his beads to get it done, so Griff, no hesitation, no surrender, no man left behind, pulls the Oni Fury, and it's down to half already, but Spreen and Guy J are on their way, but Crush is there for the confirmation. Nothing that the Tiburones can do. The pick onto Blugan, set up for the objective to go to the Order team.
The Joes are just feeling so much more decisive around these neutral objectives. All right, we got to pick.
Yeah.
Pull it. Good. Get on the golden. And Griff is already there, already dropping it down to half health. And then immediately his shot call's there. You know Leon's screaming at the top of his lungs. All right, Pyromancer next. He's still dead. Blugan just now responding, and the Pyromancer just now falling. They are playing so well around these objectives.
They are, men, and that's something that Leon's always been good at. As you said earlier, it's his macro calls and awareness. Listen, Fire Giant, though, this could be a good call from Tiburones. This is where Circle of Protection will finally hit the ground. It can't be the first one we've seen, but certainly feels as though it might be. But Cope doesn't seem to know where he wants to position. Spreen's already been targeted out by Uzi. They haven't quite gotten to do exactly what the game plan must be, and now Spreen is in trouble in the back, forced to use both relics just to get away from Uzi. Baronary does go down, but Spreen removed. The FG call is dead in the water, but at least can they win the team fight on the back? Not with Desert Fury coming through from Griff, not with Guy J taking this much damage this quickly, but maybe a chance for a turnaround from Cope, who's right in the middle, and Griff low. So maybe the Tiburones can turn this around anyway with a double kill from E to make that a triple.
Yeah, now Cope finally finishes off Promise on the tail end of that engagement, but the Sharks lose their opportunity. They can't do the Fire Giant with these 3 members. Even if they were all full health, full mana, had all relics available, these 3 members at the 20-minute mark cannot do the Fire Giant. Instead, have to reset back to neutral, and it's all off the back of what was a genius call from the Sharks to pull the Fire Giant itself. Had Spreen just dropped the circle protection and dug his heels in and fought around his team, they would have likely won that fight much more cleanly, or even potentially secured the Giant itself. But instead, we see Spreen run away, try and retreat back to his own side of the jungle, effectively isolating himself, and it allows the Joes to find that dive. Luckily, though, Heat is there to do what needs to be done, getting a triple for his team. First 3 kills on the board for the Soul Laner, by the way. But look, if you're willing to just throw it up and let your Soul Laner to make hero plays, I guess you can't fault Spreen on these circle protection drops.
Yeah, just a bit confusing in terms of the Tiburones and what they're looking for. It's hard to argue with the outcome, though, and they now have the lead. And all of the relics for Average Joes are on cooldown right now, except for the beads for Uzi. Looks like beads for Leon are about to be back up, too. But Tiburones do somehow come out of that fight ahead. I mean, obviously, they win it 4-1, just basically giving up Spreen. I think they gave up 2. Guy J and Spreen lost. So still a pretty big fight for them. But just feels like they're winning these fights like against themselves, right? And they're not using what the strengths of the comp are.
Yeah, we just need to get these
Kind of
circle
impressive,
protectors
really.
out a little bit sooner. Just a little bit sooner. Just drop it on the floor and then die. Like, we don't need Spreen to be alive here. He's not the damage output. Just make sure your team is able to utilize your best abilities so far. But the Sharks are reestablishing the defensive positioning around the Giant itself, trying to get that vision advantage as well. If they are able to force the Joes back a little bit, it should make it harder for this dive potential from the Joes to find fruition, to hit Pater. Leon, who has already been struggling on this Mercury, it still only has 3 stacks on the Rage, goes into the Wind Demon, so he's not quite at that one-shot potential that Deathbringer would afford him. All the Sharks need to do is dig their heels in and fight together as 5.
You surprised there's no shells, though, in response to this Mercury? Looks like, relic-wise, he's going to have free reign, but Uzi is the early target. Beads come out from him, and Crush finds nothing in response from Baroniri. The root lands onto Bluken, but that's nothing. And Leon had Sonic Boom charged up, but Cope gets involved. There's the Blink Engage from the rest of his team, and Leon is on a roller coaster of death. Cope is the one that gets the kill, but he falls in trade. They just need Griff to live and plant his feet, and he can turn this fight around, and he has found it. I'm a Monster connects Blugen, now the one that's in trouble, but able to get back to his team, still alive. Crush comes over the wall, but that will not connect. 1-for-1, jungle for jungle.
And still, both ultimates available on the side of the Sharks. Guy J and Spreen maintain both. That's a good CC tool and the confirmation for the Fire Giant itself. Cope makes an overextension, an overcommitment to shut down Leon. I think Cope's worth a lot more than Leon at this point. Leon has not been able to find damage, so that's a pretty poor trade, I'd say, for the Sharks. The Joes should be happy with that, being able to slow down the Fire Giant itself. And even now, the Sharks, with so much space and time to work with, have not pulled it out. The Fire Giant left uncontested means that there's no reason for the Joes to step up. Finally, we see the Sharks pull it and force the issue, force the envelope across the table. The Joes have to respond.
Well, Heat will keep Baronary out. That's the best counter steal from the Joes, and he's not allowed in this engagement. So Uzi and Promise are going to have to get it done until their carriers can join them. Both of the junglers have respawned, though. Circle of Protection is down. The objective should be going the way of the Tiburones, but it's too early, and the Joes strip the objective away. Now Spreen in a whole world of trouble as Griff and Leon both able to find one. It's a double for the jungler for the Order side team, and Tiburones have collapsed. It's catastrophe for the Chaos side team.
Look, Sharks, I'm sorry, I've been calling for these circle protections on the objectives too much this game. 24 minutes, we have been begging for it to drop, and the first time Spreen is able to step up into it, just drops it way too soon, doesn't even come close with a secure, and the Joes steal it away, win the fight. Fire Giant on 5, and now they're knocking on the door of the base.
Maybe that's why they hadn't been using it, huh? Did not pan out for them there. And the mid-Phoenix now under siege. Just Cope and Blugen, who are up to try and defend. Still 3 towers up out there in 10 seconds before Guy J is back, but that will not deter the Joes, who move in to try and close this game out. But Blugen has collected 2, brought them 50%. Back towards the Titan for what it's worth, who can now add their DPS. I'm a Monster's there. And that is it. The average Joes, off the back of what I have to assume was the game plan from the Tiburones, are able to find a Game 1 victory.
Look, I said it at the 000 mark in this game. It is a binary scale to find out whether or not your E-set found value. Did you confirm the early objectives? Did you drop circle protection on a neutral before the 20-minute mark? No? I think it's time to hang up the E-set. We got to shift up something inside of these P's and B's because you'd be much better served by just a standard mage. Imagine if we were just raining fire as an Agni or shooting people from further away than they could hit you from on Thoth. Instead, we dropped one circle protection on one objective and immediately lost it.
That's tough, man. That had to be exactly the way that on the whiteboard they would draw that game plan up, right? And still, we're not able to make that one work for them. It's a tough one for the Tiburones, but they are not out of this by any means. Still certainly can come back and find a Game 2 victory and get us to Game 3, but the Joes got to be feeling good after that one. We're going to take a quick break, then be right back to talk everything over.
We got Amaterasu in the bumper there, but I haven't seen Amaterasu in a competitive game in months at this point. Yeah, I know. Sad. I love that pick, but won't see it here today in all likelihood. Game number one back and forth aggro. Look, I mean, this is one where both teams probably felt like they had a foothold on this game at different points throughout. Somewhat even going into that FG fight, and then unfortunately a bit of mistiming on the circular protection, and that's it.
Yeah, that's all it took, man. I mean, look, the average Joes, I was thinking that they had disrespected Cope, they let him have this a Willish, but they ended up just playing so much better as a unit. But let's be real here, it made it a lot easier because Griff was absolutely manhandling GuyJ on the left side of the map. He was absolutely dominating that matchup, and it made it a lot easier for the average Joes to group up and look for these objective plays early because they had the Hunter with more damage on the map, and it made it harder for GuyJ to step up and play around the left side of the map. That extended the lead for the average Joes, and ultimately when it came time to the team fight phase, the team fight potential from their picks ended up just being better. Uzi on that Guan Yu and Promise on that Terra just brought too much sustain.
There's something about that interaction that just feels bad. I mean, not expected, I have to admit. Look, with the way GuyJ's been playing, to have this Hunter matchup go this way, and that's not a slight at Griff, because Griff has been playing very well as well. It just feels like GuyJ's been on another planet, so this is a big moment now, and Griff helping steal away that FG there towards the end. This is the fight that would just end the game. So it's unfortunate there for the Tiburones in game number 1, and the average Joe's starting to make a bit of a chase for that second place spot. 6-1-4 for Griff after game number 1, to further reiterate the point, 0-4-6 for GuyJ on the other side. Cope really the only one alongside Heat getting anything done there. I think Uzi had a pretty quiet, good game, 4-1, and a handful of assists on this Guan Yu. Guan Yu's in an interesting spot here as well, aggro. You know, seen first ban priority a good bit, but still here at the SCC and maybe even at the SPL level, if it's left open, still a fantastic pick to have on your side.
Uzi looked really solid on him. I mean, brought 6,000 player healing. That's difficult to combat. I mean, Spreen did only 5,000 damage himself. Certainly not a good game for him, really in any facet, either player damage nor in that objective secure department. It was uncharacteristic, though, I think, from the back line of the Tiburones. GuyJ normally has a much better game than that. Spreen normally has a much better game than that, but it's hard to do anything but give credit to the average Joes and how well they played in their laning phases and then ultimately transitioned it into the team fight phase. I don't know, man. I mean, maybe I'm just into the stock mindset too much, but I feel like Griff's stock right now is rising. You might want to buy while it's low, because he has had a couple really, really good weeks in a row, and when he gapped GuyJ that hard in that game, I mean, massive ADC gap in that one, no doubt about it. We'll see if GuyJ can bounce back. I've got a feeling he will.
Don't ask me about stocks. I've still got 2 GameStop stocks from whatever the chaos was a few months ago, and
that's the diamond hands, Dave. The diamond hands.
Yeah, right.
That's what you've got.
Look, my hands are rock solid diamonds, and eventually we're gonna, I don't know, the squeeze is coming or something like that.
Right.
We're launching to the moon in a Tesla from Elon Musk or something like that. I don't know at this point. Dogecoin was doing horrible yesterday, apparently. So don't hold on to that. I don't know. Don't take financial advice from me or anyone else on the stream, because I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know. I'm breaking down the crypto market, dude. I mean, it's you got me in the mindset.
And that's what people tune in. That's what people tune into the SCC for, is for someone to break down the crypto market for them. Right. Yeah,
right. All right. So here's what you want to do. Just kidding. We're not going to do that anymore, because I've clearly shown that I don't know what I'm talking about. I jump on the trend and we go from there. The trend, though, aggro, I'm going to save myself here, is going to continue to be banning out Athena, banning out Yamoja, and that'll stay the same for the Tiburones here in game number 2. Tsukiyomi and Tiamat follow there as well, and the Ratatosker still apparently ban-worthy here in the SCC alongside the set. So we talked about this earlier, actually, you and Miff did, where second pick is in a spot now where you feel like there's still so much power on the board where you can ban comfortably, and the win rate's a little bit higher on that side because there's still so many good god picks. In general, you're getting equal power for each of your picks compared to maybe the first overall pick that the first pick team is going to get. So Scylla here for Anher. Great run back here for Griff in game 2 after what we saw there in game 1. And that already kind of feels like even strength, and then you're going to get the Guan Yu on top of it. So second pick definitely showing its strengths here.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask for the Joes to do. Just grab on her Guan. Your side laner is absolutely dominated in this matchup. The Mercury pick obviously didn't do a lot of damage for Leon. It was more about what he was bringing in terms of those macro shot calls. It doesn't matter what he's playing if that's the key strength of his game right now. Just give your guys who are popping off the picks with which they can pop off, and they do that. I did think he had a phenomenal game on that Cullen. He was really solo carrying the weight, it felt like, through a lot of those fights. He goes the King Arthur this time around instead of that Cullen. It does provide a little bit less invade pressure, and that was what the Tiburones were doing early, was invading Uzi's blues, and they were successful in doing so, but they didn't really transition that lead particularly well. I'm interested to see how well he's going to be able to team fight on this Arthur in comparison to that Cullen, because I thought he did a really good job on the Cullen. I'm a little surprised they decided to switch it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting pivot for sure, and a different pivot for the average Joes here. The Ganesh, 3 games, 3 wins so far in the SCC, so 100% win rate being put to the task here, or put to the test, rather, in game number 2. But good company to be in with the Anher and the Guan Yu on your side. Seems like a Ganesh can just make good things better once the volley of abilities is able to be used. And it is in a Wheelix ban, but for the Tiburones, maybe against themselves and Leon on the other side. But then, interestingly enough as well, Leon has the Naja taken away, as well as the Fenrir, a couple of picks that we know that he likes to play, and then the Camazotz will be the final ban here. What do you think the mindset is there with the Wheelix ban for the Tiburones?
I'm surprised that they decided to ban 2 gods that I thought Cope was liable to play. I mean, they have loved the Awilish and the Camazotz as of late, so I'm surprised to see them be the ones to ban it. But maybe they don't really know what Elion's playing right now in the jungle, as he swapped over recently, so they're just trying to cover their bases on, well, what do we think is good in the jungle? Maybe he thinks it's good as well, and that's how they came to the conclusion of those bans. But the assassin pool is getting slim at this point if you're on both ends, and Elion's going to wait even one more pick for Cope in order to find his.
Wow, it's a Thanatos hover. I can't remember for the life of me. It must have been an SCC game. Actually, you and I might have been casting it. Actually, it was. It was Sino in that one game where it was all back and forth. He played Thanatos, right? And then what did he bought Benevolence or something, and then got the extra gold, and then
boots,
sold Benevolence, and then got the
boots. And then absolutely gunned it down the whole game. Did not have a good game on it whatsoever, and then still managed to win. So I guess it didn't matter at the end of the day.
Is that the strategy? Is that a Thanatos-wide thing, or is it?
No, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to just absolutely gun it down. You want to try and get ahead early and start to snowball your kills, but I don't really love it into the Joe's draft. I mean, they've got sustain, they've got mobility, they have decent lockdown on them as well. I think it's one of the easiest ways to kill the Giannis is just auto blink in the middle of your auto so it hits, then death sight, then auto, and then he's dead. But it just feels like the Tiburones are going pretty high execution here. I do like the Cupid for Guy J. It fits well in their draft. I think it's very good up against the Joes. I would anticipate a Heavenly Agility or a Sprint coming out from Promise in this game. I do think they likely need it, especially for the Ganesh himself. But overall, both compositions look very high execution to me. I'm curious to see how this one's going to play out.
Well, can the average Joes close the gap to second and hand the Tiburones their second loss of the phase? Game 2, we'll find out.
Thank you on the desk. Dolson and Aggro, Finch and Myth Swag are here as we move into this critical game number 2. The Joes going to need to find a way to deal with Cope in this early game. Though Myth, last time when he picked what we would likely consider an early game god, he just flipped on the switch 20 minutes in and looked great, so I doubt it would be the same on Thanatos, who's even more early game slated. But if you're the average Joes, I think I'd forgive you for, maybe thinking it wouldn't come till later.
Yeah, Cope effectively waited till level 15 to start getting aggressive on the Awilish last time, but a global ultimate kind of makes it way easier to pick your spots, right? You really got to be able to get involved the second you tick over to level 5. That hovering, that's such a good engage tool for him, and should be able to lock down Baronarian mid relatively easily That said, though, I think that the Sharks come away with a sneaky good draft. Aggro highlighted that it's a little bit execution heavy, but I'd argue that it might be a little bit easier to execute on around these neutral objectives. Spreen on the Ama Monster going to be a lot more mobile, and it's that singular burst of damage should make it a lot easier to get in towards these objectives. And then Heat on King Arthur, man. I mean, he just got more buttons than other people.
And they're all good, is the thing. You ever seen King Arthur do something, you're like, oh, well, at least it was that. Nah, man, they're all good. Here's the thing, though. They picked up these 3 sets of Blink up against Leon on this Cirquette, who we know is going to be active. I know there's some CC immunity in the kit for these 2 guys, but are you at all worried about Cope and Bluegan with Cobra's Kiss and Last Breath out there to potentially lock them down?
I am concerned for that, but Leon also has to put himself at risk as well once he does go for that ultimate. Like, you attach yourself to their back, stands you still for a couple seconds, a couple auto attacks from
That's true.
just about anyone. Should be able to finish you off, especially with crit back in the meta. I think that Leon is also a player that in the past has elected to not go for that bruiser build instead, likes to build a little bit more damage-centric, so we'll see whether or not he likes to shift it up here. If he does go that more bruiser-centric build, that more tankiness, I think that it's really going to come into play. Promise in particular, going to be a very easy target for him. Not Promise, Bluegan rather, or even Guy J on this Cupid, but for now, I think that we're going to expect a much slower pace from Leon, not compared to Game 1, but compared to jungling in Season 8 in general.
Right, then what we might normally see from these junglers is a leap in from Griff, who wants to get aggressive again, who had Guy J's number the entirety of Game 1, and it's just giving him a swift reminder of who the most dominant force on the map was. And it was just in case chat's confused. I mean, Griff was the most dominant force on the map the entirety of Game 1. It was not close. Maybe wants to try and run those numbers back. But here's Leon, not waiting at all, but he's out of reach of a Cobra's Kiss, gets the last one. But it's too late. Good work from Heed to retreat there, not stay vulnerable to potential pathing from Leon, who looked for an early gank and used the blink, but just couldn't get it.
Yeah, those King Arthur auto attack cancels just makes you cover space so quickly. LAO not quite able to keep up with them, and this is exactly what I expect to see inside of this duo lane. A constant fight on the side of the Sharks who are going to be able to utilize the HP 5 from Jingchen and the healing from Cupid. They're willing to just trade out their HP bars for any bit of damage they can find.
I like this from Cope, though. It doesn't have to all be ganks and kills. This is pressure onto the enemy buffs, in this case taking away that purple before fighting himself back. Gotta think. Gonna be trying to work on these boots first off, and looks like he will indeed be landing on those tier 2. So good work for him to make it over this left side, strip away a bit of that farm, and try and slow Griff down. It might have to be an indirect approach if you're trying to keep Griff from doing Griff stuff at this point, because when he's on her, I don't know if I feel like stepping up to him. Just strip away some of his farm and get out of there.
Yeah, look, maybe just even clear Promise out of there. Let Griff get the farm to himself so he can come out of there and win the lane on his own. Obviously, being glib here, we need to have Promise over there to deter this aggressive duo lane from the Sharks. But I think you're right, man. Once Griff is left alone in the 1v1, he should have a favored matchup into the Cupid. Fields of Love. Going to be immediately CC immune out by the Desert Fury, and you're just going to walk him down from there. It's so hard to utilize that healing inside the 1v1 that Cupid has, because Onher's an all-in god. If he's dedicating his ultimate, it's more than likely he's also picking himself a kill.
It's true. Feels like once it's binary for Onher, the same as you said it was for that E-set in Game 1, right? My man is either all-in committed and it's worked, or it hasn't. And more times than not, it does work. Leon now ticked over to level 5, as is Cope. They both have those game-changing ultimates available. Last Breath, a nigh uncontestable set-up tool. Sure, it puts her out of position, but you're going where I want you to if you don't have the beads. And then Cope's Execute, which does so much damage. It could be an engage as well, and that's what it will be here. And Leon has no options, but he's elusive. How could he have possibly made his way out? It just must be the CC chain wasn't perfect. If it had been, there'd have been no way out for him, and now Heed trying to escape even further. So Uzi steps up forward inside their own side of the map. The Average Joes daring the Tiburones to continue this fight. Meanwhile, Leon going to clear up buffs. That does not get done successfully, and 4 members of the Sharks show up through space and time. Doesn't connect for damage, but it gives Baronaria a route in as Crush secures the blue buff invade for the Tiburones.
It does. Now, Tiburones, like bandits in the night, they got what they came for, and they're going to leave much cleaner this time around. And you were right, Cope just a little bit too slow with the ultimate to get involved there. Up, down from Griff, trying to maybe pick up a cheeky kill, but does not find the knock-up. Surprised Gaijay not willing to stick in with that fight a little bit longer. The Heart Bomb applies a slow, and it looked like it was only going to be 3 or 4 auto attacks to confirm that kill from 100% HP on this Cupid. Instead, though, that is a little interesting microcosm. We'll look at how this lane could play out. For now, Gaijay getting the better end of these fights.
Seems like he is here in this early game. Once Griff has a bit of time to reset, we'll see if that changes or if Gaijay can hold on this time around. So, I don't know if I want to say it's what they came for, but Tiburones turned that aggression into a blue buff invade. Maybe they just wanted Ozzy out of the picture to set up to make that one a little bit easier, as you said there, Myth. But they do make that work. They have to give up on the purple buff invade, which is what they did last time. But they're remaining mobile and adaptable. They switch from purple to blue. Now here they are grabbing the Greater Scorpion early on in the game and setting up for an objective to show up on this left side of the map. Do either of these teams feel particularly comfortable trying to start early Gold Fury fights, or are we going to see these probably be a little bit later as Griff starts up again and poor Gaijay doesn't even get the 1v1. It's presence from Leon that sets up the kill, but we can go back to my question, I suppose. Do you want to see either of these guys start up an early Fury?
And neither team should feel particularly confident just starting a Fury from a neutral state. If all 10 people in the lobby are alive, I don't think either one can feel too good about starting it up, but maybe we let that one go as Bluegan's caught out here. Dharmic Pillar's dropped.
Yeah, this should be a kill onto him. It'll be Griff that gets it, as if Griff hasn't done enough this set so far. They let that one go over to their ADC, Bluegan, with no hope for survival, and now Griff on the same war path he was on in Game 1. But all that presence in left does mean this blue buff's still open for sale, for business. The Tiburones will move up and take it. They are trading pressure for Griff for pressure for Ozzy so far here for the Joes. Gonna have to make sure that that gamble, that trade, works out for him later on.
It could. The Tiburones do have a good control of the right-hand side of the map. Feels like they've been able to put at least a decent amount of pressure onto the blue buff, if not onto Ozzy himself, which has not really manifested itself too much so far. Both Soul Laners still level 8, but we're on a similar pace as we were in Game 1. Tiburones, now having cleared out both Greater Scorpions, are going to create those POIs on the map. If you're looking at just the map state and how they've been playing so far, you'd think the Sharks are going to be the aggressors onto these objectives much earlier on. But we saw it in Game 1, and with an E-set as well, they weren't quite willing to step up in the early. Maybe off the back of a pick, we might see them start to rotate in, but I think it's really going to come down to which one of these Soul Laners leaves the lane first. If we see a 5-man grouping from one team, they should have a distinct advantage.
Yeah, it does seem like they don't love their fight from the neutral so much, and arguably it works, at least around objectives in this one. So still, that early blink concern I had, not really coming up. Heat and Cope have both been relatively unscathed. It was just Bluegan that had that spill in left, but who knows if Beads have made much difference. I'm thinking no, since he immune to the initial control from Leon with his ult. So, hasn't really come to pass at this point just yet. Still, the Tiburones have kept this game relatively even. Looks like, at this point, there's not enough gold separating these two teams to call it a lead in either direction. Though, there are some experience favoring certain matchups. Heed and Cope are ahead, as you'd expect, after everything they've done on the right side of the map, but mid, support, and ADC slightly favoring the Joes after everything they've done to get Griff ahead on this side. Is Cope now maybe even considering an invade of some sort, but he comes back over towards right where Baroneri's low, through space and time, not enough to get the kill on the Spreen, and Leon dodges out everything, uses the portals to get to the back of Griff, get to kill, gifted courtesy of Promise, back to their ADC.
Uses the Desert Fury, but does not find its way home. Instead, take it up into the air to Avalon. Griff, you're in some trouble, bud.
And he will fall. A huge kill to go the way of Heed, shutting down Griff, who is on that 3-kill streak. So it does end up being 1-for-1 mid for ADC. With Griff that far ahead, does that then favor the Tiburones, Myth?
Yeah, I think that just picking up that bounty is going to be so important for them. That is a huge trade. And Griff jumps in there and finds next to 0 value. Even the kill he got was gifted over to him. We're going to need to see him play a little bit more cautiously on these jump-ins. It's not Game 1. You're not 5 levels up at this point. Instead, you're going to have to reset the mental there. And already, off of 1 death, actually a full level down.
Yeah, and his beads are down. As our promises, those are synced as well. One set of CC seemingly having put pressure onto both of them. And now the Now the Tiburones can take it back. Don't know what I thought was happening there. Not a gold theory for sure. and they'll take a bit of a reset. That's tough, though, now that this dueling with the Joe's that much more vulnerable. In particular, Promise, when he's in these mid 3v3s, if he gets inside that CC chain from Bluegen, Spreed, however it may happen, he's having a hard time getting back out of there. But it seems like we've moved back to sort of a calm state here in this game, where both these teams just kind of farming their own sides of the jungle. 1 to 3 in the kills, and a bit of an advantage in gold, about 500, maybe even a little bit less, favoring the Tiburones. So still very much tied at this point.
It is. It's just experience separating these two teams, and even then, not wholesale. It's individual matchups. It's almost as if this game is being played in 3 separate matches. Each lane its own individual game so far. Not overly team play oriented so far, but that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be distinct advantages that do come about for the teams. For example, I think if any time we see a fight happen over there on the duo lane side, should likely favor the Joes because they have a slight lead there. Griff able to pick up a couple items over his counterpart. The Light Blade already finished out. Even Thebes starting to get stacked up as well. Or if you want to play it around solo, gotta favor the Sharks.
Baronari's got to be careful. Rotations are coming in. Through space of time, connects though, and Guy J will fall. But Cope lands down, comes crashing into the mid-tier 1 and finds a kill, sets up for Heed to get the other, a 2-for-1 in favor of the Tiburones, and using his Thanatos ultimate well. And now Ozzy perhaps walking in and gifting over another kill, gets hit by Alma Monster, hops up onto the horse, but Cope, undeterred, is in range, but cannot quite find the kill. Griff didn't rotate into this one. Looks like he stayed over in left. Should be a tier 1 for him, but hard for that fight to not go in the favor of the Tiburones.
Yeah, the Tiburones do so much there off the back of Griff not rotating in. Game 1 was essentially won, the early engagements, off of Griff's early rotations, but this time maybe lost a little bit of confidence off of falling down early on. Guy J does make the rotation, but falls in turn as well. So how does that one pan out? Tier 1 tower should go down, and the Joe is able to pick that one up for themselves. Gold deficit next to 0. Experience deficit pretty hard to talk about as well. This game is so tight where it's going to be the first neutral objective to really separate these two teams. But it feels like the aggression has been largely rooted in the Sharks. Cope diving tower with his ultimate. Heed out-rotating Uzzy in these mid-lane engagements. And it just feels like the Sharks are getting a little bit more primed and ready for this gold for your War Pyromancer.
Well, it comes back to the question, right? Will the pressure that the Joes had in duo or that the Sharks had in solo be of more value? And at this point, with Heed proxying these waves and then rotating out ahead of Uzzy, it's been favoring Heed. And then with Cope being able to go essentially wherever he wants to with that Thanatos ultimate, as you said, maybe would embolden him to be a bit more aggressive than the early part of Game 1. So far, that does seem to be the case as well. As the Tiburones have managed to get things close in terms of the kills, but about 500 gold up, still very much close in that department, as you already covered. So I wonder if instead these level 12s, which we're coming to, and these power spikes will be the moment. But no, the Fury in the side to the Sharks, who have all 5 members on the left side of the map. No way the Joes are making it in time to contest this objective. The Sharks, in the dead of night, strip away the Fury with just better rotations. Heed has been everywhere in this game.
He has been. It doesn't come up in that engagement. He not even put to the test, doesn't even hit the gold Fury, doesn't really need to zone anyone either. It just felt like the Sharks snuck one away there. This, though, is important. The Joes need to realize that they're going for the Pyromancer. They walk all the way across the map. It's the play the Joes made last time around. Time to put up a defense.
Yeah, can't just let them have both uncontested. But now they've left their support in the middle of an awful situation. Promise forced to use beads. He does survive, and Pyromancer still standing, but Cope deletes Baronary back in mid. My man doesn't use a single relic, just gets a sweet taste of the afterlife as in comes Leon, dropping that last breath on top of Guy J, who is involved in this fight. But even still, the Tiburones can likely come back and do this Pyromancer even still.
Yeah, just drop that Cupid heal, make sure everyone gets back up in a fighting shape. Bluegen's the only one low, so he's the only one at risk. Uzzy has ultimate available, should be enough to dissuade as Griff, a little bit off the mark. These Desert Furies have been ambitious this game. Just max range, no CC, no problem, or maybe a slight problem is now Griff on the retreat.
Yeah, can you call it off the mark if the shot was beyond doable, likely in most situations? Probably. The shot you don't like then is using it at all, as Griff can't find much of anything. Meanwhile, Uzzy stays in right, try and find that tier 1. Meanwhile, in mid, Guy J gets it, and now maybe Heed biting off a bit more than he can chew. He grabs Griff, gets the beads,
Nah, they're
and
running.
Heed's already done his job. The Joes are the ones retreating, and Heed stands his ground firmly. They didn't get Pyromancer on that right side, sure, but seems like they're getting everything else they want. Though Uzi not going to rotate. He's now invaded the blue buff, pushed up these waves. Will even continue to push up into this tier 2. At the very least for the Joes, Uzi seems to have caught up.
Look, Finch, imagine thinking he's bit off more than he can chew. He's a King Arthur with tank boots, Gaia, and Glad Shield. My man can essentially unhinge his jaw. Nothing cannot be digested here. He is nigh uncontestable inside of these engagements. So hard to finish him off, and that's why he's able to force 3 people back all on his lonesome. Heed is likely the hardest person to deal with on the map right now, and it seems like he knows it. Man's been rotating around with the most confidence that I've ever seen exuded. Almost
abandon.
Just, yeah, does not care. No regard for his own life or the life of his enemies. And he's right to do it. That's how you play King Arthur at this phase of the game. Create space for your team, and he is doing a great job of it.
Leon set a trap. I don't think Blugan, though, was the target, who shrugs off that Cobra's kiss. So the only upside, as we covered already, is that Uzi has caught up. Mid lane's caught up. Support's even favoring the Joes, and ADC's up. The big problem after the Joes is how behind Leon is. I know that being behind is different amount of damaging on different gods. For someone like Sir Cat, who's likely just going to be grabbing initiations, Pyromancer should be in the sights now. The Tiburones, who's just looking for setup. Is it the worst thing in the world? Is that through space and time was close.
Man, the Sharks are so much more confident with their objectives this game, aren't they? Which
When
is
they-
blowing my mind. They had East
Who needs circle protection?
By the way, yeah, nah, we got crushed. That's better. Strips defense when they're inside of it, I suppose. But it's been working out for them. The Sharks now establishing a 3,000 gold lead, and I can only say, keep up this pace. Keep fighting around Heed. Wherever your King Arthur is essentially just a red carpet rolled out for the squad. Oh, he's walking into the tower? Might as well take that tower. The Sharks making the correct call to just stick close to Heed.
Right, I mean, they started grouping up early when they had all 5 members in mid, all 5 over at the Gold Fury. They decided that being near Heed as the tip of the spearhead was going to be enough for them to win. Good damage from Spreen onto Promise, who's thinking long and hard about what it's like to play up against Scylla. It is no fun. Leon now caught out, and it's Heed who has him in his grass beads on the tail end, and Leon not going to escape the whirlwind of Raging Steel, not going to escape at all, as Heed is the one that gets the kill in the end. And Griff not even here, he's over in left. Meanwhile, Promise stuck with the Wolves. Blugan will take care of the enemy support that time, as Griff might be able to get this tier 2. Not a horrible trade, but certainly not one you like to have to make.
Yeah, Griff looking like a Season 2 ADC right now. I'll rotate out when I'm level 20, alright? I don't care if they're inside our tier 2 tower. I'm going to get this one over here, but maybe sticks around too long.
No, he jumped.
Because he's walking into the raid boss.
Yeah, this is absolute death for Griff. There's almost no need to cast when he so certainly
Use the
already
beats?
has one
Oh, the
foot
portal!
in the
Oh.
grave. No, I like what you did there, but no, Griff is very dead. So he'll be sitting on the bench for 45 more seconds. Got the tier 2 in left, yes, but and I think in that moment, maybe you gotta think trouble's on the way. See if you can get a back off, or you're just dead. What's your read there? Through space and time, almost got him out.
Normally, I'd say just hit that B button as quick as possible. Use your wave to stop the minions from stopping your back, but instead tries to rotate into the jungle. Maybe he was thinking to himself, oh, I could possibly pull all the Primal Fury. There's no way the Tiburones aren't on the Fire Giant itself. Well, he was wrong. They were on the way to him, and now the Fire Giant.
Right, and they should be doing it quite comfortably at this point. Leon in trouble in the back. It's stun into I'm a Monster. Clean as you like, and Leon removed nicely by the Tiburones, who've got to be feeling that they had a shot in Game 1, and now to put this game to bed in Game 2. But GuyJ just backing, just out right in the middle of the field. This has not been GuyJ's set, and it only gets worse. Though it looks like his team has a good chance to clean things up. No, Blugan drops as well. GuyJ has turned this into a small bit of a disaster. Good silence from Promise. Cannot find that stun, and Promise even gets hit by Crush, but Cope takes through space and time. What's going on?
Yeah. Look, normally I know you're leaning on your analyst to be able to break that one down for you, Finch, but That was a crazy series of unfortunate events. Hopefully we don't get sued for dropping that name. Either way, I think it's the only way for us to describe how that one goes. What is Guy J doing out there, bro? Just slamming the B key, doesn't even look. My man had to have been in the shop, and now the average Joes have an opportunity to close up this gap ever so slightly around this Primal Fury. What was a 2,000, nearly 3,000 gold lead for the Sharks has largely evaporated, man. You gotta clean up these plays. That was just a throw. Get your Hail Mary spamming in the chat.
Miff, I don't know if you heard, but I'd almost said this was the point in game one when they probably thought they were about to start winning, and then they got away from them. And here in game two, it's very come close to happening again. The good news is Leon is so far down in the dumpster this game that he's still having to look up. He's been behind all game long, but everyone else has caught up now. And as I was asking earlier, I think Cirquette can still find decent value just as sort of a setup machine, a beads burner. We'll see if Leon can navigate from the depths.
Your wording is so apt, if not vicious, right? Down in the depths, the dumpster, just catching raindrops to sustain himself. And you are right, still 2 levels down is this Cirquette, who had to slow down his build as well. Wingblade picked up. Decent utility, decent movement speed, not survivability or damage, though. Shifter Shield as well is going to make him not as tanky as you'd like and not as much damage as you'd like at this point. So Leon certainly going to be struggling to find some items to pick up.
I like this, though. The Tiburones trying to brute force back their lead. Leon in the back. He goes for Guy J right away, who still does not have the beads, and Guy J twice in a row. The first one out in these team fights, and Average Joe's getting value from El Leon all the same, who is in the clutches of Heed. Yes, but Heed very much alone, forced to retreat. But Cope comes in and cleans up the enemy jungler now, right in the thick of it. Griff getting knocked up, but has retreated. I'm Monster will not connect, but Heed and Bluegun are there to clean up that last kill. So the Tiburones still able to pull this game back and avert disaster with a 3-for-1.
Man, Cope dunks into the back on his own to set up for his team, and now picks up a kill on the Promise as well. It's just Uzi left standing. Hop on Epona, bud. Can't save you. 1 versus 4.
That's going to have to be the call. He knows how low these targets are, but he just can't do it alone, trying to keep them locked down under this tier 2 to be his unofficial second partner in this fight. But it just has not come to fruition just yet. But he does have the Tiburones too low for them to try and do fire here. They're going to take a back it looks like, Miff. And they'll have a couple members back up, Leon at the very least, but still should be room for Tiburones to move in and start this up.
I'd like to offer a formal apology to Guan Yu's horse. His name is not Epona, and it did indeed save him. Uzi makes his way out of there easily inside of the Tier 2 tower, but if you want to go back to that team fight, you could tell the exact moment that the average Joes lost the thread. Cope dunks into the back line 1 versus 3, picks up a kill, essentially solos Griff, and then the entirety of the Joes kind of turn around, they turn their head, and they go, huh? And then immediately get crushed by a pincer maneuver from the Sharks here. That was a clean team fight for the Order team that amounts to just about nothing. Weren't quite able to turn it into an objective. Even Pyromancer still standing at this point, but the Sharks looking to rectify that issue.
Yeah, the good news is the relic situation for the Joes is abysmal. Not a single relic available to be spoken of at this point. Whereas there's still relics for Guy J, Bluegun, and even beads for Cope. Going to make life real hard for the Joes if they want to contest this objective. And it's Bluegun on zoning duty. The only one back there at that point. Crush does hit Promise as Dharmic Pillars comes out. And now Guy J, the one low again, he's forced to exit as I'm a Monster connects, and Baronary has no hope, no dream of surviving, making a double as Uzi gets collected the same way, and the Joes unwisely stepped into a killing field with no hope of survival, no safety relics, and I think that's a field day for someone like Spreen, who's got all the setup from his team he could want.
Yeah, now surely they back up to the Fire Giant. Guy J pulls it first, drops down to about half HP, but should be able to secure it pretty easily here. Average Joes have no recourse. They cannot step forward. Maybe Leon looks for the 1v1 in mid, and that is a maybe, by the way. Does burn the beads and immediately retreats. At level 16, up against Cope's 20, that is a 4-level deficit. I cannot argue with the decision-making. Remember 4 minutes ago where we were poking fun about Leon down in the dumpster, didn't have any items? Yeah, his build has not changed since then. My man is struggling to find some farm.
It's going to be difficult for him to catch up to what Cope has done for this team, 4-1-10. He's been the cleanup crew, which I think is what they were missing with that Awelish last game, right? Instead, Cope sort of relegated to this position of taking care of those loose ends. Now it's an all-in on this Phoenix. Promise already low, but Blugan stopped by a good pillar. He's still in there as well, but very comfortable, as we've already covered. And now this Guan Yu can start to sustain up the Joes, but against a Fire Giant team with a 7k gold lead, gonna be tough for the Joes to find a way to pull this one back into contention. But for now, looks like the Tiburones are going to back up on that Phoenix Siege. They've got Cope getting the mid-tier 2, and there's still 2 towers over and left to collect as well.
Look, 3 entire minutes on this Fire Giant buff. They could take their time, the Sharks, that is. I imagine we see a 4-1 split, maybe have Cope go into mid and play just that singular role while the rest of them work through that left-hand side. Cope, though, having forced his beads out by Leon earlier on, is going to have to play pretty safe if he is the one that they elect to send on the split push. So for now, it looks like it is going to be a 5-man group, and Cope, delayed back, maybe decides to group up. It's desynced, but it's totally fine. Again, they have so much time to work with and such a large lead at this point, but the Joes are not quite out of it. They do have an unorthodox mage inside of Yanis who doesn't have the same level of consistent AoE damage that maybe something like an Agni or one of these more standard mages is able to bring, but will be able to have that all-in potential, act as an assassin inside of these fights. It's going to be a spearhead defense from the Joes, likely off the back of an engage from Uzi. He hops on Epona, tries to find a stun, hopefully through space and time can act as that 50 caliber ray to put someone down. Outside of that, if the Sharks just survive the initial engagement from the average Joes, they just win the fight after that.
I like that your idea of sort of a standard mage is just Agni. I think that shows your old school nature.
Hey, Raw.
Yeah, Raw's pretty key too. There you go, you know.
Yeah,
but Raw feels pretty good in all those situations as well. So it is Phoenix defense time indeed. Looks like a 3-2 split for now, with Cope and Heed pushing up the wave in mid. Blugan, Gaijay, and Spring. Blugan and the carries taking care of things over in left. And Leon's been able to find Sun Farm, has even more defense coming online now towards the tail end, which he will desperately need. Even going to clear up blue before he comes back to defend. Now we'll get to see the exact approach. Looks like they'll put Cope over in left with everyone else, and Heed. No, they're going to keep this 3-2 with Cope and Heed being an unkillable force of damage and tankiness, and he just walks on through. No one there to say nay, and who would bother in the first place? So now they've even got a pincer set up behind this Phoenix positioning, and look where Baron Area is. They're going to go engage on him because, of course, what? Why in the world would you step up there? But yep, Baron Area pays the price, even gives up beads for all the good that did. Now to 5v4, and basically nothing committed by the Tiburones to find that pick.
Hey, look, he'd had to blink, okay? So that's huge. Just kidding, I'm being glib. This is a huge power play for the Sharks now, and Leon goes in, finds the ultimate, immediately beads out by Cope. Deja vu.
Who goes up into the sky. Left Phoenix already down, and Leon low in the middle, but Cope goes maybe for Promise. Doesn't quite find that there. Blugan in trouble in the back, but doesn't even matter with the mid and left side Phoenix down. I think Tiburones every day of the week would trade their support for those two objectives. Average Joes can only take essentially the scraps.
Yeah, 10 seconds left to spare on the Fire Giant. Seems like a pretty good time to disengage anyway. Blugan commits his life to create a little bit of space, and it gets them a tier 3 tower, a Phoenix inside a mid. Phoenix on the left-hand side goes down as well, both of which are the hardest lanes to defend once you start to worry about subsequent Fire Giants. I don't imagine we see the Joes step up here. If anything, I think the steal attempt, at most, should look like Baron Area across the map from his own fountain, trying to snipe away a Fire Giant. Outside of that, I want to see the Joes as a team inside their own base, trying to set up a defense.
So Tiburones are ahead in game 1. Had the Fire Giant secure in the east side, it gets away from them, slips through their fingers. But in game 2, even when they stumbled at a very similar point in the game, the 20-minute mark, they bounced back and now are in a really high percentage advantage state, where the vast majority of the time this game should be theirs. Looks like they are going to wait on this Fire Giant, as you posited, maybe even wait for the enhancer, only a minute away from it. And the average Joe should not be coming out to contest. We'll see what the approach is for the Tiburones. They might not even have to wait. Might just get that close on its own. They'll take Pyromancer for now. Meanwhile, Baronary clearing up in left, trying to safely farm, because he does not have B. To the Joes are nearby. I mean, if you've already said you don't want this, so I can't ask you that, but now that they're here, is there any way to do it that you'd be okay with?
Cautiously and from a distance. Send Promise in, and he tries to bestow the Fire Giant to his team in exchange for his life, or drop a Dharmic Pillar from a Rage and pray that Spreen isn't on the secure.
you got to think you have a 0% chance to defend on your Phoenix to come in here, and it looks like a soft presence, but they're not actually going to come to contest. So good from the Joes. They'll show something, but they'll never actually step into the range. The Tiburones grab the FG a little bit ahead of its enhanced state. Maybe that was the idea. Put a little bit of pressure on him, make him grab it earlier. Who knows? They show some presence, though, and back off in the end. It's right side Phoenix that's the target now, and left side waves and mid waves are not too far away from being pushed up, as the Tiburones can do this patiently if they choose, or could even choose to get aggressive. Belugan in first. He just walking at Leon, choosing his targets at will because no one can stop him. And Baroneri looking for a good through space and time is my only thought back here.
Yeah, well, he might miss his opportunity. He spent that entire time looking for it. His Phoenix already down to 10% HP. Look, I understand you want to play far back, and that's the call that we made earlier, but this is pretty far away. He is on the legitimate opposite side of the map. No way Baroneri ever makes a response here. Instead, puts a target on his back. Seems like Cope has got the blinders on, wants to take out this Yanis, and thinks like he can. A Blink Scythe should drop him down to about 50%. Cope hovering around the edge.
As the hi-rez proc on the auto, it's he that moves in first, then the stun beats come out from him, but Cope right there to clean up, but good control, and Cope ends up low, can't continue the follow-up, and Desert Fury does connect. So it looks like the four remaining members of the Tiburones don't love their chances. Belugan was still nearby, he backs up, and the Titan now completely exposed with all three Phoenixes down. Tiburones might stick around for the left side. Phoenix is about to come up, but Belugan on the right side in some trouble, throws Promise back towards the team, but quick from a range, finding the autos, and that will get Belugan to want to leave this fight. Meanwhile, the rest of the squad now has a chance to look for the rest of the team, but Gaijay gets Leon. They turn around and find the Choquette all by herself and blow her up right on the spot. Now Tiburones like their odds. They move in alongside the fire minions, but the Joes still for now keeping them at bay.
Yeah, instead, pings on the left side. Phoenix didn't even have time to rotate over, boys. The minions took care of that one. Mid Phoenix spawning up just now. Average Joes should try and put up a defense. Never mind, it's gone.
But that's what Tiburones likely wanted. Up into the ultimate is Spreen, and he connects on the Baroneri. Patience is rewarded. He finds himself a kill and even dashes in aggressively to try and put down a crush. It's just Griff up for big-time damage. Udgy and Promise can only do a bit, as Tiburones still have plenty of members here to fight. The Titan now getting lower and lower. Belugan right in the thick of things, but not taking that much damage, as Spreen has been forced to leave. Usy has dropped to the damage from Gaijay, and the Titan now in critical condition, and the Tiburones will move us into a game number 3.
We got a good little view with the mentality of these players there. Gaijay doesn't swing a single auto attack at that Titan. My man was trying to pad some damage and find some kills, and he does. Meanwhile, what's he doing? Ever keeping his eye on the dub. Just works on the Titan the entire time. Doesn't want to deal with the trolling of his squad. Game 3 situation, and I'm pumped for it.
That's exactly right. Now, will it be the Sharks, who I think can arguably say they were in the lead in both games now and could have won, or will it be the Joes, who, just as their namesakes say, have been fighting back as the underdogs? Game 3, I cannot wait. We'll have it right after the break.
This one's a little longer, and the outcome is different. The Tiburones in 32 or so minutes able to take this game on, and really Guy J there towards the end of the game, and by the end, I mean literally in the Titan room makes a pretty big difference on that Cupid, but felt like still maybe outclassed by Griff in this early game, but that was kind of it, right, for the average Joes. It was Griff, and then kind of felt like nothing. Everyone else from the Tiburones was off to a great start that game and just got drawn out a little bit.
Really smart gameplay here by the Tiburones, because you're right, Griff was really bodying Guy J once again over there in that duo lane. Think about what the average Joes did last game. They went over and played around Griff, they pulled Gold Furies, they played around objectives. Well, their composition this game doesn't do that nearly as well. They don't play around objectives particularly well with this draft. And instead of playing around that, the Tiburones just said, okay, we'll just be aggressive on the right side of the map. Every single highlight through the early game is going to be on that right side of the map, because why would we risk it taking it to Griff early when he's stronger than Guy J? I think that was a lot of very smart gameplay. He'd completely dominant in this game. He did whatever he wanted. Spreen was actually able to get some damage off in this game, a difference certainly from that ESET in game 1.
Yeah, and look, you look at Thanatos as the drop-down, execute, big damage type assassin, but also some setup. Once the hovering death connects, that's a quick stun that Spreen is able to kind of catapult off of, and we saw that combination not only in the highlights but throughout the game a few times. And the post-game stats would probably show you a pretty quick game, so if anything, you know, maybe a nod to the average Joes for being able to hang in there for 32 minutes, but felt like, outside of a couple moments here and there, was not in all that heavy of contention. Wondered how this King Arthur would look aggro. He'd at 4-0-11, able to control that front line pretty well. An uncharacteristic bad game from the Guan Yu, still 6,000 healing, 13,000 damage on that one. But just felt like this one, kind of a team effort that started to get away from the average Joes.
I just think the Tiburones came in with a good game plan. They fought around the right side of the map where Heed was stronger. This Guan Yu pick takes longer to get up and running. I've been kind of a notorious Circuit hater as of late, and it kind of continued. Felt like El Leon really couldn't make that same level of impact as Cope could through the early stages of the game. And certainly Bluegun was much more impactful than Promise was. That Xing Chen really paying off for him and the rest of the squad. So if I'm the average Joes, I'm picking something in the mid lane for Baron area that actually can burn Gold Fury, can secure Gold Fury, can play around the objectives, and I am just playing around Griff as much as humanly possible, because he's playing really, really well right now.
Yeah, you have to.
The Tiburones are going to want to keep him out of this game.
Yeah, even in a loss, Griff looks great. So you gotta play around the hot hand, right? I don't know how Ramsey sleeps through that one. I guess the blanket kind of blends in. She is this massive of fuzzy darkness over there, taking a nice little nap next to a smaller brown stuffed dog. That's her favorite toy. Fun fact: you're all learning plenty of stuff today about Ramsey. But I agree there, Aggro. I think the Giannis pick was interesting. And look, I love watching a good Giannis play, because it can totally change the face of a game, whether it's big damage numbers, great portal plays, whatever it is. Just didn't quite have that here in game number 2. So after game 2, we'll jump into picks and bans for game number 3, see how the strategies change. Average Joe's back into that first pick slot. Tsukiyomi and Tiamat have been their 1-2 punch of bans. Tiburones have kind of kept things consistent as well across the board. Athena, Yamoja has been their answer. Don't imagine to see much of that change here, which is interesting.
No.
It's kind of an interesting thread to follow, where you wonder if being in first or second pick forces you to change your bans at all, and both these teams happy with what they're taking away, regardless of getting 1 or 2 picks.
Yeah, seems like it, which it should change your picks and bans, or your bans, quite a bit, whether you're in first pick or second pick, but these teams seem willing to just kind of send it from either position. It ends up being the Scylla once again for Baron area, and this is exactly what they should be doing, going for more objective secure, something that can fight around the map a little bit better. I mean, that Giannis, Baron area did solid damage in that game. A lot of times when we see Giannis players have bad games, it's because they're unable to get their damage off. That wasn't the case for Baron area in this game, but certainly the level of impact was different in between games 1 and games 2. So I like him going back to the Scylla. A little early for the Xing Chen. I don't think that Promise has showed a propensity to go to it. And the Raijin, I mean, On her's open. I certainly would have wanted to take that away from Griff, but maybe that's a god that Guy J isn't feeling particularly comfortable on right now. I'd be shocked if the Joes don't just go on her Guan in this spot, because that's what they got in second pick last game on her Guan. Now they can just add a Scylla to the mix if they so choose.
All right, I'm with you. You feel like this has got to be in on her, because if it's not, it's definitely going to get banned out or picked by the Tiburones there. So feed the hot hand, and Griff has got the hot hand here. Again, even in a loss in Game 2, had a great look, and then maybe the biggest driving force in a Game 1 win here for the average Joes. And so Griff is helping us on to a Game 3. Answer is the Cucullin, though. So Guan Yu Cucullin ends up looking like how the solo lane will look. What do you think about Cucullin here in the current meta? Have you seen the impact that warrants this high of a priority?
I have. I think that Heat has played the two best solo laners right now in the game, and that's King Arthur and Cucullin. I think that those two are really the premier. I mean, Guan Yu is certainly up there, but he just doesn't bring that same early game to mid game pressure. And neither Cucullin nor King Arthur feel like they're falling off massively come late game. They're still being able to frontline effectively. And I'm just of the opinion that if you can get ahead and maintain a lead, that's better than having to reclaim a lead later on. So I'm always going to err in favor of the higher pressure picks, and that's what King Arthur and Cucullin are. It's curious that he decides to go Cucullin instead of the Arthur. They lose the Cucullin game, win the King Arthur game, and then he goes back to Cucullin. But I don't mind it. I think that it's a fine position. I thought that he'd really dominated the lane in Game 1 and in Game 2. If he feels more comfortable with the Cucullin up against the Scylla than the King Arthur, then that makes sense to me.
And what we see here in the second wave of bans is what I expected to see banned in Game 2, just kind of flip-flopped, where the Wheelix gets taken away from jungle over there in Tiburones, and the Najah gets taken away from Leon. This is what I expected in Game 2, so a little bit backwards, but end up reaching a very similar conclusion. Remember, Fenrir was banned in Game 2, was not banned here going into Game 3. And so now Cerberus and Fenrir, the dog composition in the final two picks here for the average Joes, looking for some early game pressure.
And they've got it between the Fenrir and the Cerberus for sure. I like the Cerberus up against these objectives. You prot shred it for your Scylla, make her secure even easier. I think that you've got plenty of damage now on this Joes roster. Maybe a little bit light on CC, but not so much so that they're not going to be able to function, or that Baron Aerie is going to be lacking heavily for setup. It's just higher execution on that setup. You know, it's Fenrir stun. That's a little bit more missable than something like Merc Dash, or, you know, it's Cerberus 1 up against Terra 2 or Terra Root combo. Those are a little bit easier to land. But overall, I think the Joes have a very similar composition to Game 1 that looks very successful, just like they were able to do in that game. Can the Tiburones fight more around that right side of the map, keep the proverbial ball out of Griff's hands in this game is the big question.
It's going to be a Thanatos run back here for Cope. Don't have the I'm a monster big massive burst damage on that follow-up, but Raijin is able to provide some of that as well. Game number 3, average Joes versus Tiburones. Let's find us a winner.
Great job on the desk yet again there, Dolson and Aggro. It's Finch, Miff, Swag that are here as you go into this critical Game 3. I think I like this a lot, Miff. Let's double it up from now on. Doug providing the views. And Miff, it's hard to ask for a better top 3 than Guan, Scylla, and On Her, huh? And it looks like that Guan will be over in Uzi's hands in solo up against Heed on this Cucullin again. I know that Cope had a great game on the Thanatos, but is that enough for you to feel like the Tiburones kept up in the draft, or did the Joes kind of run away with it?
No, the Joes handily won this draft, man. I mean, you didn't even have to finish out the rest of their draft after you list off that top 3. I mean, let's talk about individual value of picks. I don't think that the Sharks won out anywhere at all. Normally, when you get Cucullin, you're feeling pretty good about it, but Uzi's got Guan Yu, Thanatos, not really inside of that top pick contender. Raijin clearly outclassed by Scylla recently, at least at the SPL level. Look, I think if anything, maybe you say it's a toss-up in support and then firmly in favor of the Joes as far as On Her goes. Look, but that doesn't mean that the game is
Yep.
lost there. It's about individual
all.
play on field and how well they can play as a team. And I think this is a draft that fits the Sharks' style incredibly well. When you're able to facilitate Gaijay playing from a range, doesn't need to be that initiator. I don't really associate him with that aggressive play style. Not the Onhers or the Cupids of the world, more so the Jingweis and the Roms. And then Blugan having a large AoE CC ultimate to facilitate Cope, finding stuns with his, could all work out.
Certainly could. The Joes perhaps brought the better tools, but Tiburones could still assemble something better in the end, right? It'll depend on how this team come together, and as you said, how this big AoE CC comes in. Aggro was saying that maybe the Joes, I think he was saying the Joes were a bit light on CC. See if that'll be enough. Leon gonna have to be that center of it, I'm thinking, from them, and then setting up. Or is it the other way around? Do you want Leon getting in there last when the beads are down, or does he have to be the one with his leap and ults setting up for Promise and Uzi and Baroneri to find their CC pretty reliably?
Yeah, I think single target CC is always going to be the one that comes in second, right? Why is Leon setting up for Uzi's AoE Cavalry Charge or Promise's AoE Stygian Torment? Instead, it's going to be one of those two in first to facilitate that Ragnarok, to find someone, drag him out of position, and set up for these kills. I want Leon almost always to be getting value out of his ultimate. If someone beads us out, that's an unfortunate situation because the Joes certainly have the tools to burn away those beads.
And they should, right? And should be able to put the Tiburones on the back foot here a bit if they can. But the Tiburones have, I think, pretty undoubtedly, once we cross that 20-minute threshold, been in the lead in both games so far. In one of them, the Joes managed to out-confirm Circle of Protection, and the game ends instantaneously on the spot afterwards. In Game 2, though, the Joes were completely shut out. Here in Game 3, will this be the pace breaker where the Joes find that bit of early lead and come to the mid-game with it, or will it be the Tiburones yet again closing one of these games out? That's been the options it feels like so far. Certainly could be even something different happening here.
It could be. The Sharks have a decent late-game draft as well. Rom should realistically outscale on her in the late game. That ultimate still does just buco damage, right? I mean, head up into the air, do 1,500 to whoever you feel like, as long as you can hit all 3 shots, and then you are able to utilize that second ability for additional attack speed, which should work incredibly well with the more crit-centric build that's been very popular recently. So if the Tiburones want to, could just wait it out and play for the late.
Aggression there from Blugan and Gaijay, but able to lock these members down. But as you said, if you're the Tiburones, I mean, I don't think they're necessarily going to be crazy ahead of the Joes, but certainly should be coming in feeling comfortable as Leon just jumps in onto Cope, who's got the ultimate brutalized, lets him keep with the damage on I'm a Monster, juked out by Cope, and I think that was very necessary, or my man could have fallen right then and there. Now he rotates over for some easy duo lane kills up into the air with that ultimate. And who shall he pick between Griff and Promise? It's Griff, who gets shredded right away, but not quite enough for the kill with Griff still having beads.
Finch, as a point of reference, I didn't realize that there were 3 blinks on the side of the Sharks up against a Fenrir. I mean, those are 3 targets that should be dying on cooldown before level 12. The second Ragnarok becomes available, and Leon does tick over to level 5 here, should be able to find some pools on just about anyone that he wants. Heed, Cope, and Blugan all going to be very easy to lock down until they're able to get some CC immunity available to them. I mean, the combo's there. Ragnarok and I'm a Monster. That should just kill.
The vast majority of people that should happen to couldn't quite happen in that last engage. Leon didn't have that ultimate just yet. The setup still good on the back of the leap, but those pieces couldn't line up there. But now maybe Leon getting aggressive over in right.
Tough.
Cannot find Heed, though, so does not pan out.
Yeah, he just keeps walking forward through Leon. Leon clearly thought Heed would have put some regard, some respect on his name, but instead does not. So Unchained does not make its way home. Baroneri gets his crush immune and walks away. All right, maybe saw Blugan out of the corner of his eye and decides that the wave is a little bit more important. Gotta agree with that decision. Crush being used that early means that he likely would have got out confirmed.
Instead, backs it on up. Nothing to worry about so far. This is the slowest early game start we've had just yet. The Joes around that 7-minute mark in game 1 started things up, but Griff is running in, using the Desert Fury to immune, getting pulled, but killing Blugan here should be next to impossible. But my man Griff seemed undeterred, did he not? Aggression on aggression. and does at least make Blugan use the ultimate.
Griff just walked up on him, dude. Blugan's inside the purple buff, finishes it up. Griff could have impaled through it, you know, like affirmed the buff for himself, or done anything before that, but instead literally walks into melee range, like, you for real on my purple, and yeah, he's for real, and then dedicates his own ultimate off a jump in. Griff losing out on a lot of kill potential inside this lane. GuyJ is allowed to play aggressive now.
And Cope maybe too, who's nearby, but elects to back off, walked over a ward, at least on the way out. So Griff knew he was local, as Oracle Vision will go over to the Joes. There's a blink in from Cope, though, who knows he's got backup on the way, but Promise leaps out on this Cerb pick and is able to get back towards safety. And I think we're talking about this Cerberus. We'll see him over in solo sometimes. We'll see Mike play him in support sometimes as well, but not a ton. Is his role in this one mostly to be the guy that's getting beads out for Leon? Where do you want Promise's focus to be?
Getting beads should be priority number one, but at this point, even then, not a big deal. He's also just got 3 targets that have blink, so if he's able to find a Stygian Torment when someone's ultimate is down, should be able to set up for a kill relatively easily. I am still flabbergasted that the Sharks are just willing to go for these aggressive relics in the first slot against the raw amount of lockdown CC that the Joes has. Ragnarok, Stygian Torment, Cavalry Charge, all fantastic lockdown tools to set up for the I'm a Monster. You'd think that the Sharks would be concerned about it, but so far, 7 minutes in, it literally has not come up.
No, I mean, even Cope just got caught out, I believe, by Ragnarok, because Baronera used ult, like, coming out of the middle lane to try and follow up, but Cope just kind of left on his ultimate. You know, he took the express path and chose to leave, as now purple buff being looked at by the Joes. Blugan on his way to contest, as he did earlier. Impale there, but they still lose the purple. Blugan stealing away with Furious Roar on the tail end. That's got to be frustrating for Griff, who's been having a good set, but I think got a bit ahead of himself in Game 2, and maybe even a bit here in Game 3.
Was that the dot damage from Furious Roar that secured it? Did Blugan get it?
Yeah.
Maybe. It felt like it. That is a tough situation. That's ticking for about
Tough.
10 damage at that point. So just unlucky. The auto attacks don't really ring true for the Joes here, but 8 minutes in, Game 3 situation, both teams playing a much slower paced game. I gotta think that come late game, you're probably gonna favor the Sharks draft just because of how well they scale and how much easier it is gonna be to get that CC immunity to their names. Maybe Magi's cloaks get picked up. Maybe we see some beads purchases as well, and then it's gonna be even harder for Leon to find value. Normally, we see Fenrir's nowadays go for that stone-cutting sword in the first slot. Instead, though, a bruiser build getting picked up on Chile. First off overall for the order side jungler.
And Greater Scorpion going down for Cope. Leon is getting aggressive onto Blugan, but this has to be done quickly, or Cope will just rotate his way in. They will not find a kill in mid, and that Cope rotation still a problem. So Leon goes into the ulted Baron area as well. Felt like purely defensively, but now they have a chance to turn this game around as they're able to pick up Blugan, who's low, and Promise gets in there with the ghastly breath and cleans up the kill. Now GuyJ falling to Griff, but not in his usual grave, in the usual cemetery of duo lane. No, he shall fall here in mid instead, and Promise blinks in for the double kill. I'll clean it up if you can't. And just like that, the Tiburones end up a bit lost.
Yeah, interesting engagement there. We saw Uzi make the rotation back from base, uses the ultimate just to close gap, but does make it to the Gold Fury before his lane counterpart. Average Joe's 2 for 0 and a Gold Fury in the early, and about a 2,000 gold lead to boot. Experience, though, largely equalized. That is wild to think about, that the only kills of the game and the only Gold Fury doesn't result in more than a 400 experience lead at this point. Just goes to show how well the Tiburones have been farming.
They've had the pressure. There's been those purple buff invades to think about that Griff hasn't been getting. There's been some spots on the map where the Tiburones had pressure, and the average Joes are just now making up for it. But that seems like the kind of fight that would start off in favor of the Tiburones. But both Leon and Baroneri go up into their CC immune ults. Cope kind of about faces, just land safely in the jungle, and they walk up and grab Blugan, even turn a kill around onto GuyJ. Just good stuff from the Joes with that awareness. I think those CC immune ults are defensive just to make sure they couldn't be targets, and it seemed like that worked as Leon now looking for Heed, and he has plenty of backup. Heed with a miscalculation as the entire squad shows up, but Heed still alive. How could I claim a miscalculation when the backup was there, and Heed shall escape somehow unscathed? My man was in the lion's den, but maybe someone else will perish for his crimes. Blugan is the one in trouble first. Heed comes back in, looking for the knockups, and Cope does land. Leon seems to be the target. They make it 1-for-1 support for jungle. Heed turn it into a favorable trade.
Yeah, Tank Boots and Stone Agaya, man, that is a ridiculous amount of survivability. And now Uzi stuck around a little too long, didn't you, bud? Getting caught out by the three-man core. The Tiburones falls down, and he picks up a kill for his team.
Promise does jump over the wall, but Guy J lining up
1,
the
2,
shots.
3.
Able to find, I believe, all 3. So now Cope just needs to clean this up with a scythe.
Okay.
And connects with it. Cope ends up taking that narrower pathway, and Cope lines it up pretty easily.
Yeah, the Sharks take a clean fight win, an overcommitment from the Joes on a Heed, which generally should pan out. No beads available to the Kukulkan, only 2 items in, gets hit by 4 legitimate people on the side of the Joes, even taking I'm a Monster as well, and just lives through it all. Did not avoid it, did not juke it, did not outplay my man, just survives and sets up for the rest of his team. He trusting in the build and the god to get him through that one. And now Tiburones win a clean fight, pick up a greater Scorpion, close up the gold lead, and maintain the experience lead. Chaos side team looking pretty good 12 minutes in.
That's a backbreaker, man, and now look where Uzi is suddenly way behind Heed. That right side of the map changed in an instant. Cope now way ahead of El Leon too, and that right side of the map is exactly what the Sharks used to dominate game number 2, was getting Heed dummy far ahead and then letting him and Cope be the divers. But Leon not going to get inactive all of a sudden. Blugan the next target. They haven't had enough of going for tanks yet, but Blugan nowhere near as hard to kill as Heed.
Yeah, thank God Blugan didn't pick up Stone Agaya, right? Or maybe that grab wouldn't have panned out this time around. But this is what we need to see from Leon. He has to utilize this period of time where no one has beads on the side of the Sharks. Instead, they go for the aggressive relics, the blink pickup. So Blugan should be a pretty easy target to pick up consistently throughout this match. The same can be said of Cope. No longer actually gets back to base, picks up beads for himself. So Cope makes it through the fire here and is going to make it a little bit harder for the Joes to target select inside of these engagements.
Yeah, and it clearly doesn't matter what you do to Heed. That man's not dying as
don't hit him.
Pyromancer started up by the Joe. So not a ton of good targets that aren't Blugan. As Cope nearby, a little too early for the steal. Looks like the Pyromancer will go to the Joes. That play on the Heed, kind of a backbreaker, man. Certainly doesn't put this game out of reach, but mentally, the damage cannot feel good. To have had Heed, I think, in 9 out of 10 cases, dead to rights with that positioning, with that kind of collapse. And for it to instead turn into, a 3 or 3 for 0, something close to that. A big fight in their favor, 3 for 1 perhaps. And now the Joes right back near even. A little bit of a gold lead still in their favor. They're going to have to look elsewhere if they want to turn this around. And now they desperately got to get some farm for their right side of the map. Would your approach be to spend more time over there or kind of leave Uzi to his own devices?
Look, I think Uzi is in a position where he can be killed. He doesn't have Stone Agaya, instead picks up the Breastplate of Valor, a little bit of physical defense his way. I think that Uzi should be left alone on an island. He's not going to get soloed by Heed, and Heed's not dying to literally best-case scenario situations, right? Like 4 people slamming ultimates at a Heed. He's walking away and laughing at you for it, then picking up a couple of kills for his team. So instead, let's fight where we can win if you're on the side of the average Joes, and that's in duo lane and in mid lane if Heed isn't there. But instead, it is the Sharks grouping up first, and Heed works his way over to the duo. Seems like it's going to be a big old fight over the Oni Fury, and the Chaos team has the defensive positioning.
Looks like a full 5-on-5. The big difference here is that Uzi and Heed don't have their relics, but Bede's much closer for Heed, only 20 seconds, as opposed to for Uzi, who has a whole nother minute where he won't have that safety relic. Ultimate's up for everyone, and most relics up for everyone, but it's Tiburones with the defensive positioning who are inside the actual pit. But in come the Joes, pushing them out at least a bit. Otherwise, though, this is still a fairly even battle these teams will be going into, if you overlook how far behind Leon is yet again to Cope. But he jumps in anyway, and Blugan the target again anyway. Bring him to the crush, and I'm a monster, and Blugan deleted, but Cope is up, as is Guy J. The snipes will land on the back of the stun. Leon makes his way out of there. I'm a monster connects again, and Cope goes down. The average Joes somehow finagle that fight into their favor.
Yeah, finagle. Leon grab Blugan again. Normally in the SPL, when you see a Fenrir get locked in, there's 5 beads on the opposite side, and I think Blugan starting to figure out why, thinking to himself, man, I haven't been able to do anything in these last couple of fights, because he just gets grabbed and immediately shut down. He is not tanky enough to withstand this onslaught of damage. Average Joe's reaching into the jaws of death and coming away with a win. Fantastic peel onto Leon off the back of the ultimate as well. Shell comes through, and Cope not quite able to secure it, so Gold Fury goes their way. 2-for-0 fight and a tier 1 tower as well. Big swing for the Order team, putting them a firm 3K in the lead.
That's a big fight, huh? And really the Tiburones didn't get to do much. I mean, as you said, losing your support basically for free at the beginning of the fight is never going to be a good way to start one off. And then Cope, I think, trusting the follow-up with Gaijay up in the air, dunks in. That didn't come to fruition either. And the average shows, as you already covered, in a pretty good spot. Now, I don't know, man. How many times are we going to teach you this lesson, old man? That's heat. And I don't see how you plan on killing him. Maybe just trying to force out the rage transformation. That's all I can think, is that they thought they were going to get some kind of favorable exchange of cooldowns, because you are not killing him.
Yeah, well, they do get the rage transformation, and Ozzy, undeterred, he legitimately just looking at him inside of his own tower. I don't think he's too concerned about maintaining his life, but instead, going to be willing to give up the tower. It looks like that enhanced Oni minion wave should help out with the push and create the space for the average Joes to establish their own defensive positioning, this time around the Fire Giant proper. Tiburones slow on the rotation over, but Ozzy, man, you are deep right now, and there is a big rotation from the Sharks, but still has the cavalry charge available to him, which means that there's very low risk of dying. Gonna go ahead and reset off of stripping away a tier 1 tower. Only one tier 1 left standing for the Sharks here, and it's in mid, one of the easier ones to clear out once both teams start to group up as 5.
It does seem like nearly everyone is on board with the grouping plan. Griff is still over in the duo lane, clearing up all by himself. That tier 1's already been grabbed too, so he's got to be careful with Cope. Starting to show some presence on this left side of the map, but Cope's going his own way. 2 ships passing in the night as he looks around, and if he tries to collapse now, which he's not, he's way down behind the tier 1. Now he'll just take a back. Meanwhile, Griff and Leon have engaged, and they have picked a target. It's Gaijay, who's given up the beads already, used the ult for safety, but no one else can afford to step up aside from Leon. There's Griff getting there for the peel.
Oh, good damage.
On the tail end. And looks like maybe Cope didn't channel that back in the end. He's still here in local as the rest of the Joes back off.
Yeah, that damage from Griff, man. No crits come through. Don't need him. Still swinging for 170 per auto attack. Blugan 0-4 at this point. Has not stacked up the Thieves. 18 minutes in. Does not have the second relic available. Again, 18 minutes in. Has been suffering for the hubris of picking up Blink in the early. Leon just hitting him with a 4 key, and that's all it takes. And still has not got any recourse for it. Needs one more level, and you better believe it's going to be a beads pickup.
Especially if the stun is first, right? Then even the CC immunity of the ult for Blugan doesn't really come into the equation because it's such a quick combination from that stun into ult. Pyromancer now in the sights of the Joes. Blugan and Heed nearby, and still I don't want anything to do with Heed, but he blinks in, finds both of the backliners and knocks them up, and then sticks on top of Griff. Meanwhile, Uzi moves in, stuns out the backline on the other side, so Spreen goes up to the ult and guarantees the death of El Leon, who falls to the damage from the backline mage. Some damage coming out from Baron Arias. Promise does manage to collect one, but where does he bring them? Right back into the squad as I'm a monster being held, but not actually coming out. The Tiburones are now looking pretty low, but Cope dunks over the back, takes care of Promise, and puts the Tiburones right back into firm control of this battle, and Uzi has nowhere to go. He falls to Gaijay 3-for-0 in favor of the Sharks.
The Joes fight with Leon's ultimate being down, weren't quite able to start it off by removing Blugan from the match, and immediately the Sharks come away with a favorable fight. Look, that's as simple as it is. Binary scale, I think. We didn't get the Ragnarok ultimate to ring true, and they immediately lose out on the engagement. Maybe off the back of some great space creation from Heed. Jumps into 3 members on his own and distracts them for a solid 20 seconds before regrouping with the rest of his squad. And now the Sharks in a firm position to take the Fire Giant. Still 10 seconds left on Uzi, and no ultimates available besides the Ragnarok for the Joes. I think if anything, soft defense, try and scare them off, but if the fight really starts up proper, it's going to favor the Sharks.
Yeah, hard for the Joes to really get in there and scrap. Worth noting that Blugan still does not get beat. It's Sunder and Blink for him as he has no respect. But look how low they've got Cope. He just gets the kill on the Barrier though, and he keeps him alive, and the ultimate gets off in time. He could re-engage for an execute, and he finds one in a Griff. A double kill for Cope, and his Thanatos has turned this set around in game 2 and 3. Now it's Spreen's turn with them all lined up in the corridor for Tycho Drums to ring true. Not a solo you're looking to hear, as the next one up on the kill list is Promise. 4 for 0, 2 dominant back-to-back fights, and now Leon deicide.
Deicide for the Chaos team there, Fish. Look, we called it, bro. If they step up to defend the Fire Giant proper and take a fight, it was going to favor the Sharks. Ultimates were not available to the Joes. Take a peek at the cooldowns on the left-hand side of the screen. Baronary, Promise, and Griff get their 4th ability cooldown back in the grayscale screen. Now the Sharks able to close up that gold gap pretty well for themselves and pick up Fire Giant onto 5 members. Look at all those towers still left standing for the Joes. Those look like gold caches on the map to me, just dead drops to go get picked up.
I don't know, it felt like you padded on the hood of the order side map and said, look how many towers we can fit in this bad boy. Super old, bad meme that for some reason was in my head just now, but certainly is going to be tons of gold going the way of the Sharks here at this point, and it's just 2 dominant back-to-back fights, and in particular, they don't have an answer for this Heed Cope dive, do they? I mean, Heed gets in there, disrupts both backliners simultaneously. Cope's damage is unreal when you add in the execute. I like this call from the Joes, hoping the Tiburones are still resetting and trying to steal away the Fury. We know, though, with our top-down view, that is not the case, and that the Joes might be walking into a miserable, miserable trap, Saw style, if they're not careful. Blugan moves in first, has the blow, but Cope nearby for the backup, and so he just keeps on going. No one's dealt enough damage to make Blugan scared, and 2 CC immune ultimates come out from the Joes, Uzzies and Baronaries, and now the Tiburones, the ones collecting the Fury.
Yeah, by the way, Blugan goes back to base, finally, to pick up that 2nd relic, 22 minutes in. Yeah, that's not Beads, by the way. It goes for the upgraded Sunder. Look, I get it. You got the Magi's Blessing now. You're not nearly as worried about it. You already have CC immunity in the ult. Might as well try and push the lead even further. And so far, even when he was falling early on in these engagements, doesn't seem like it slowed down the Sharks too much. Now, starting to barrel on down this left-hand side, I do not imagine we see a defense from the Joes outside of the Phoenix, and it seems like the Sharks have picked up on that hint as well. 3-man grouping on the left takes out a tier 2 tower. Meanwhile, Cope in mid, able to take out a tier 1. Leon shows himself on the right-hand side and maybe shows the hand of his team. No way they step forward here either.
No, and these last couple of tier 2s are what's going to really push this gold lead out of reach. It's still only about 3k, certainly not out of reach for the Joes, and maybe that's why Promise moves in, gets the beads out from Spreen, who respects that pull. Meanwhile, Leon, again, can't make it happen. Thunder Crash and Gaijay will spell his execution as in comes Spreen, looking for the pull onto Uzzy, who responds with beads of his own. This additional tier 2 now, though, pushes that lead a bit further out of the comfort zone if you're the average Joes. Maybe even the Tiburones keep on pushing. Not with Blugan so low, you think, but Heed is the first man in. Cope took to the sky as well with his ultimate, but Heed's in trouble. Needs some backup. A Desert Fury gets him, and Cope still manages to land into the backline looking for Baronary, who falls to the damage from this Thanatos in the back, but maybe Griff can get him, and he does. It's a double kill. They keep their Phoenixes alive, only give up 2 tier 2 towers. Still bad, but they kept that bleeding from getting a whole lot worse. They're still in it.
They did. Good play from the Joes there, off the back of what was a true 4 versus 5, by the way. Leon dies before he's able to find any value in that engagement, and luckily, Griff able to turn it around. Felt like to me, Heed has been listening to the cast. Maybe we've been singing his praises a little bit too much. Walks in alone into the Phoenix up against an on-her in the late game. Not the greatest look or feel for him. Does get immediately shut down for it. And then Cope trades out his life in exchange for Baronary. But that is still a large win, grand scheme, for the Sharks, who were about 3,000 gold down, if you're able to remember all the way back to that initial dance around the Fire Giant, to now 3,000 gold up, having stripped away the majority of towers. Fire Giant respawning in about 1 minute and 30 seconds. I think the Sharks are in a position now where they're going to have an advantage on this next dance.
And they will have to contest despite this deficit, and it's not even quite to 4k. So very much still within reach here of the Joes, and they've got a lot of relics still on cooldown on their side. All of their Aries are still well over 1 minute away. Yeah, it's about 3,000, really, the gold deficit and the experience lead. Sure, that's a lot of numbers down there, but take a look at the charts. Still not level 20 yet for the Joes, so they're still feeling it to some degree, but they're really close to crossing that threshold and evening this game out. So really the Tiburones don't have a ton in their favor, but still certainly in the lead. So the Average Joe's got to find a way to win this one uphill as Uzi retreats and rejoins the squad. But Tiburones do go right to the actual fire and ready to start it up once it does eventually spawn. Joe's got to bide their time until then.
We need this Ragnarok Ultimate to ring true if you are an Average Joe's fan. If you're not, maybe hope that Leon dies with it still available to him yet again. But instead, the Tiburones is going to go ahead for the Tier 2 tower push. Going to see if maybe they can force an engagement and find a pick before they start the Fire Giant proper. Spreen and Cope hovering around the edges tells me that they're not really looking to force the fight here. Maybe just trying to force the Average Joe's to step a little bit too far out of base.
The Average Joes do step a bit further forward, but not going to take any action if they don't have to. Now all their relics are up except for Baronary. About 20 seconds away from Aegis. Should have the beads up before I'm even done speaking on this point. We saw Pendulum of Aegis finish there for Baronary. Big difference to the ADCs, though, is Gaijay has Deathbringer already, whereas Griff does not. So there are some big advantages still for the Tiburones. The Average Joes had to push their way through.
They do, and the Average Joes look like they're willing to put up a defense here. It is going to be an unfavorable fight considering there's so much CC immunity available to the Sharks. They've got all their ultimates available, every single relic as well. But the same can be said of the Joes, but the Joes a little bit more dependent on that Ragnarok ultimate, a little bit more dependent on their CC to find the wins inside of these engagements. But the Sharks are showing a good amount of respect here. They're not willing to go ahead and pull it up from an even state. Instead, just hoping that someone on the Joes makes a mistake, steps too far forward. Heed makes the first move in this chess match, displays himself on the center of the map. It looks like he's setting up a pincer maneuver here, but spotted out is he by the Average Joes, getting pinged outward already.
And so they retreat back towards their Tier 2 tower in right. Blugan had the Magai's proc taken away from him by Promise, finding the stun off that first ability. So a bit more vulnerable now is Blugan, actually quite vulnerable to an engage from Leon, but would they be able to kill him in that time becomes the question. Blugan steps in first. Whirlwind of Rage and Steel finds Little, but Cope just one-taps Baronary, removed from the fight in an instant, and makes it up to the sky. Absolutely huge that Baronary didn't get to get off a single cooldown in the fight, so Cope comes back in, but pays for it with his life. And Average Joe survive the onslaught from the Thanatos, but can they survive the rest? As in come the Tiburones, Gaijay puts down Griff, and still now favorable fights. It's 4 for 3 in favor of the Sharks, and Uzi stuck in a line of fire, taking damage from Spreen, but does survive it.
Man, that ultimate from Heed in the base stance keeps Cope alive as he tries to get up into the air. If one more auto attack was able to make its way through there from Griff, should have shut down the Thanatos before he's able to get to the ultimate. From there, Cope realizes, alright, if I go back to base, I'm worthless to this fight. Instead, I'm going to trade out my life and try and set up for another kill. Dunks down on the Griff to help out the rest of his team. Phenomenal play from the Sharks jungler, and it gets him this. Fire Giant pulled out and already dropped down. No way else he can steal it, right?
He makes his way in. They've reset the objective. That's almost as good as, I mean, not as good as stealing it, but about as good as they could have hoped for, I think, in this position. So the Joes push them out, and they keep this game within reach still. 5K gold, a little less than that, about 4,500 in favor of the Tiburones, but still not out of the reach of the Joes. Somehow, Myth, they're keeping themselves in this set, giving us a little bit more time. Griff has now finished off that Deathbringer and can come back out at full strength with the Gilded Arrow upgraded to Ornate as well.
Look, this is just nuts. The Average Joes have essentially fought the last 3 engagements, one member down. Someone's getting instantly blown up.
Yes.
Either it's going to be Leon or it's been Baronary so far, and still somehow to maintain presence in this match is so impressive. Just goes to show how strong their front line is. Uzi shows up, and the Sharks aren't willing to risk it, even though they were relatively healthy, even though they had the secure advantage as well. Fire Giant was down to about 10%, and they were not willing to risk it. Now, we're back to another completely even dance. Only 5,000 gold separating these two teams. 30 minutes in, 5,000 gold doesn't really mean a ton. I'd say that this game is at a complete stalemate at this point. Whichever team is able to win a team fight cleanly should be able to just win the game off the back of it.
Yeah, there's some small things, right? Like Bluestone, not upgraded for Uzi just yet. A couple more defensive items there for Blugan, like a tier 2 of 1 item. But that is about all as this fight kicks off and Uzi the early target. They manage to grab Promise, though, gets pulled in. Stygian Torment is the answer, but the slows are stacking up, and Promise has nowhere to go. Again, the fight starts with a member being removed instantly of the Joes, so Gaijay puts out some snipes of his own. Not enough for any more kills, but already the Tiburones in a 5v4 position. They finally get rid of that tier 2 and right, a little extra gold for their squad the next time they back. Remember, that has not been spent yet. But it looks like the Joes still want to find a way to defend, and this is risky as Heed is taking quite a bit of damage from Griff if he can get off a couple autos, but Leon forced to use beads to jump over the wall, so up into the air goes Cope, but does he feel comfortable diving into 4?
Yeah, there's no world Cope goes in there. Meanwhile, left-hand side of the map, Minions absolutely going in on that Phoenix. Someone likely on the Joe is going to be forced to go back here. It's going to be Leon, who could rotate over for the defense, but trusts his bird to be able to handle itself. But heading himself back to base does leave open the Fire Giant. Enhanced at this point, the Sharks already burning it down.
It's indeed, as you said, the enhanced version. So the average Joes are forced to retreat and now see they can pull off another impressive base defense. Now all that gold the Tiburones just collected will be spent, as everyone except for Blugan so far has taken a reset. Looks like Heed's still out there as well, but he's at about max capacity already. Next best thing for him is selling off his boots. So this real gold lead they'll come up with should affect the Joes pretty substantially. We'll see how long they'll be able to respond to it and where Tiburones look to push first. Maybe over in left, away from FG. And the Joes then ought to find a way to defend. But they've been doing it all game long, clinging to life support. It feels like when the Sharks should have had, it feels like a more substantial lead even than this by now. They're finally getting to the point it feels like maybe they could have been at 6 minutes ago if the Joes hadn't been desperately holding on.
Yeah, the Joes have been doing a great job of mitigating loss, but now it's not about mitigating loss. It's a binary scale. Can you maintain the base and win the fight, or do you lose the base and lose the game? Tiburones have decent siege potential here. Every team that has an ADC and enhanced Fire Giant is going to have pretty good siege potential. All they have to do is create a little bit of space for Gaiji to work his way in there, and then use that additional attack speed from his second ability to immediately eviscerate one of these Phoenixes. And if they do decide, the Sharks that is, to group up on the left-hand side, this Phoenix is already weakened, dropped down to about 80%. So I'd say maybe 3, 4, potentially 5 auto attacks from Gaiji is all it's going to take. With 2.5 attack speed, it's going to take about, what, a second, maybe 2?
Well, again, he just walks past that mid-tier, the mid-Phoenix Cope, winning his battle up against Leon so far, who missed his initial leap in. Brutalized damage is good, but Cope is up in the air and looking for an excuse. Left side Phoenix is already low. Cope lands in the back, though, doesn't find much with the ult, except for a much-needed escape. Meanwhile, Gaiji pulls out the scope, rains out the damage, but Leon grabs screen, gets both relics defensively out from him as Cope ends up falling first, and I'm a Monster blows up Spreen, but Promise does fall in the back. But somehow the average Joes have held on. They turned into a 2-for-1.
They're chasing.
Yes, they lost Phoenix, but they're still in this one, and Gaiji gets stunned. In comes the leap. Gaiji falls too. Suddenly the average Joes have a shot to stay in this game when it looked like they were up against the brink.
And now Blugan stepping forward says, all right, please go anywhere besides my own base. I'm going to try and buy a little bit of time here. Griff having a little bit of fun, decides to stop moving, but 30 seconds left on Spreen, 30 on Cope, a full minute on Blugan. I think this is an opportunity for the average Joes to potentially look towards at least pushing up the left-hand side, taking out a tier 2 tower, but no way they're able to work their way into a Phoenix. Already 20 seconds left on the respawns, maybe not even the tier 2 tower. All they do is maintain the game, keep their base alive, but at the cost of their Phoenix.
Not sure if they're really going to get a whole lot more off this. Maybe that tier 2 up there, maybe in left, but still, even that would be a bit risky. It looks like, yeah, they are going to just fall back. So as you said, they keep themselves in this game. They take Fire Giant away from the Sharks once more, and they close up that effective gold cap. Eventually, the big differences aren't going to even be the actual gold lead itself. It'll be who sold off boots and moved into that true 6 slot, who's got their relics upgraded at this point in the game, and those differences are a lot smaller anyway. Having a whole 6 item in there pretty darn good, but you know, in terms of who's got those relics all the way upgraded, not as crazy. Maybe some pots will be the difference as well. The average Joes are really giving themselves a chance to drag their way back into this game and maybe still give the Sharks a run for their money.
Maybe, but that left-hand Phoenix going down means that if the Joes do decide to maintain this grouping here, well, they're leaving one side of their base exposed. Maybe it's a Hail Mary 5-on-5 engagement trying to catch someone out on the Sharks here, but Joes, you've been spotted, man. There goes the sneaky play. It's just a true fight now.
And they just are seemingly okay trying to brute force it. Now they're on the retreat. But can they keep that up? He makes his way in and finds a route onto Baronary, who's in trouble, turns around and fights. But the snipes come through, and Baronary gets to do nothing. No relics, and no I'm a Monster comes out in that engagement. Now Spreen looking for the Tycho drums. Can't connect any of those shots, but force him into the path of Kofu Lex down, and does get Leon low and sent to the grave. So now it's just Promise Grip and Uzi still standing to carry the hopes of the Tiburones to not give this set back over, or excuse me, for the Joes to not give the set back over to the Tiburones, but Uzi stuck in the middle is gonna fall. Griff falls too, and that should be it. The game is done and dusted. The Sharks gonna find themselves a 2-1.
The Joes, the second they get spotted out trying to move from one piece of cover to the next inside of that just 5-on-5 engagement in the jungle, should have disengaged. It was no longer an ambush, should have just left, but instead dug in their heels and lost the fight cleanly. Felt like the minions might have been able to do it on their own if the fight went much longer, but luckily for the Joes, it doesn't come down to that. Instead, the Sharks put them down in the true old-fashioned way, sending them to the Shadow Realm.
Yeah, not bad there from the Sharks at all. Things maybe got a little scary at that point. Going to be hard for them up against the very top here in the NA SCC, but no time to worry about that when they won a hard-fought battle today against the average Joes, who looked like they did not want to go down.
No, these guys were hanging in there. Every time they got knocked down, they get back up. The light not once did leave their eyes. These guys are contenders on the battlefield, and they will never stop trying to win. Unfortunately, though, this time they were not quite able to stack up against the competition.
Impressive what the Joes were able to do, but it's the Sharks that come out victorious. Congrats to them, as we'll take a quick break on our side, and we'll be right back.
one's got to feel brutal for the average Joes. Feels like you're on the verge of taking a set off of one of the best teams here in the North American SCC. Would have really closed that gap for themselves in the chase for the top 2. But Aggro in another lengthy game, this one about 35 minutes long. It was just too consistent from the Tiburones to break through.
It was just that dive from the Tiburones. Oh, good this game, and the peel just was not quite there from the average Joes. Cope and Heat in particular just made life miserable for Baroneri in this game. I mean, Baroneri got blinked on in one shot how many times in this game, and Cerberus does a lot of things really well. Peel isn't really one of them. You've got to be able to use your own relics in order to survive in situations like that. And I thought Baroneri was just a hair slow on the relics at times, and it's tough to get criticized for something like that when you're just a millisecond slow, but it's the difference between winning and losing in a lot of instances. The backline dive was just too good this time for the Tiburones.
And look, Cope, this is now a pick. I don't know if it's going to be an every game style of pick from Cope, but back-to-back games here in this set, back-to-back wins here in this set, closing in on 20,000 damage. It wasn't just an engaged tool, as you know, Thanatos isn't always known just for the engage, as the 11 kills roll through. Don't often get to see double-digit kills in the SCC, but Cope got it done here. So Aggro now maybe a new pick some teams need to look out for against the Tiburones.
I think so. I mean, we've seen Cope go to the Willish, of course, or the Kamazots. I think the Thanatos might be up there now for picks that you're going to need to respect when you go up against this squad. And they've got some pretty big matchups coming. So I think that overall, the Joes should walk away from the set feeling pretty good. They gave a really good performance. It never feels good when you feel like you should have won, or you could have won in this instance. But at the end of the day, this average Joe's team is still, this is what, their second week with this roster configuration. They've got a lot of growing to do still, and they're going to be good.
Right.
I think the biggest takeaway for me here, Dave, from this set is that Griff just destroyed Gaijay in all 3 lanes. Gaijay then came in and team fought very well in games 2 and 3 in particular, but Griff looking like he might be one of those premier hunters in this region now.
Yeah, and look at how now the standings could have been. I mean, we're talking in could have, but it could have been 3-3 for the average Joes, and the Tiburones would have been 4-2, just one win separating. But now it's a couple, or now it's a few rather. The Tiburones to the average Joes there could have been a much smaller gap, but instead it grows by 2 from the average Joes to the top there. A chance for the Herculean Hooves later on to close that gap, though, still on that side, so that's something you have to look out for, and they'll have their chance against the Winter Dogs. Definitely not an easy team to go up against. And then the Fishies and the Sturdy Artisans will be the final North American SCC team to play here. Pandemonium versus Just F6. That'll be the one on Saturday. So Winter Dogs versus Herculean Hooves. You'll see that before the SPL here tomorrow. So still a lot of contests to be had here in the North American SCC, bro. But, it's tough to see a world where if the Tiburones continue to play this consistently, it's going to be difficult, I think, to close that gap if the next highest team. What? Is my analysis is
Dave,
the
behind
joke,
you! Watch out! Dave, turn around! Watch it! But no, the other way, Dave! Watch out!
Yeah, she was napping, and what is
it's
it?
About
7
time,
minutes till dinner time.
Right?
Yep.
Yep, exactly. Mackenzie was right before this death segment. She does her thing where she puts her head on my leg and just looks up at me and wags her tail real hard. That's her go-to move. It's dinner time, guys. We got in here.
I'm trying real hard. We're trying to keep it at 5 o'clock or beyond, but the forces that be are definitely starting to push us in that direction. That's it for the SCC here today. Remember the SPL rundown. That'll be up next. So stick around if you want to talk all things SPL. Hosted by APAM, of course. Frost, the Wormy, and Biggie will be the guests. And then, hey, an interview with that guy, Shinto, will be joining the show for an interview. So the SPL rundown up next, right after. I'm going to go feed this dog. Not right now, though. In 6 minutes. We got to make sure that we stick to our schedule. But on behalf of myself, Agra, all the other casters, everyone back in production, thanks for watching.